This computer. All right, we're gonna get started on our class today. I've got 21 things to go through, 21 laws, which gives me about 7 minutes per 9 minutes per law. So we'll do our best to do that today. So I want to say hello, shout out to all the people out there in video land. Thank you for watching. For those of you guys that are here, we're gonna have some fun today. I think this book is really valuable. I don't know if you really thought that. We're going to try to go over that. It's always interesting teaching someone else's things. I love teaching the Bible. To me, that's my go-to. I love that. When I'm teaching concepts, it's a little more of a challenge for me to do that. But I still really enjoy doing it. I think this is really great material. So we're going to have some fun. I do want to leave opportunities for questions. So if you, I don't want to get so focused on getting through the material that we don't actually talk about the material if you have a question about it. I will emphasize today, so you'll see up on the screen, you will see things that are underlined. And I would generally encourage you, if you see something underlined, I would say that's important for you to know when you take the test. So if you see that, just make a special mental note. There's a couple things I'll tell you. There's two of the study guide questions that compose 20% of the test. So there's 10 questions, 10 answers in those two questions, those two study guide answers. But I will tell you which ones they are, and we'll spend a few more moments on those to bring clarity to those. Okay. So school of ministry, you guys have been all a part of the school of ministry. So you've come up from here certified to this class, or you started and you've been in these classes. Yeah, you're teaching certified. You don't have to do certified. So, but school of ministry to me is really an important thing to do. I don't know if you're interested in how this all started. I was sitting in an airport in Houston, Texas, after a Church Multiplication Network event, and thinking, how in the world can we reach Idaho for Jesus? We want to plant churches. That's one of our visions for Idaho, to plant 10 churches in 10 years. This Sunday, I'm celebrating the first anniversary of a church that was planted last year. And in a month, I'll be going to a new church, Together Church, which is being planted in South Boise. Wow. So we're seeing churches being planted. We have a total of 6 churches that we planted in the last 3 years.
Wow.
So we're excited that we're doing this. But here's the big thing. I was sitting in an airport going, God, how are we going to do this? And I had a vision to plant churches. God said, you need to raise finances, and then we need to create leaders. And I'm like, well, how can we create leaders? And in that conversation, one of my professors from Bible college was the person who started School of Ministry in Alaska. And so I called him in that airport and had a conversation with him. How do I start a school of ministry? What does that look like? And can you guys help us? And that conversation really was the genesis of School of Ministry here in Idaho. So you guys are all an answer to prayer that's been years in the making about creating people in Idaho to reach people in Idaho. And I think some of you are going to be here to minister and serve in the state. Some of you, I think, are going to be serving worldwide. I know Manasseh has a desire to be a missionary and a call to that. And I just love that. I just love that we get to have input into your lives to help you answer the call of God and see the call of God realized, not only for your benefit, but also for the hundreds and thousands of people that you will touch in your lifetime. So it's important for us to do that. I love this format. We get to have conversations. You get to ask questions. It's not just a face on the screen. Sorry, I'm just a face on the screen. But you also can have a dialogue. You also have a conversation with people, I think, and even here in this room, you can get to know other people that are serving God in similar capacities and create relationships. So that's kind of what School of Ministry is about. So we are going to talk about, as we kind of get started here, we're going to talk about leadership skills. So our book is the 10 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership, the 10th anniversary edition, which is probably the hardest anniversary edition to ever get a hold of in the history of mankind. So if you had the 10th anniversary edition, congratulations. Many people couldn't find it. So some people had a hard time with it. We had a link up and I don't know if the link was broken or didn't work, or I actually, because I believe that I should always have the book and go through the same process that you go through when I teach the class. So that way, when I'm teaching the class, I actually know how challenging it is. When I originally got the book, I actually got a book. I clicked the link And I got the cheaper version of the book, which I thought was the same version of the book, but it wasn't. It was actually an older version of the book. And so in that version, they had the law of addition was called the law of E.F. Hutton, which I asked these guys if they knew what E.F. Hutton was. When E.F. Hutton talks, people listen. See, that's how you know. And that was that. And so he changed that to the law of addition because nobody knows what that is. And then the law of the pitcher was originally called the law of reproduction. So he used different terminology to describe the same concepts, but the concepts haven't changed. So when he says, because I always think it's funny, you say 21 irrefutable laws. These are never changing laws, but he changed them. So he changed the name of the law, not necessarily the process of it. So
Then yeah, actually, when I went back and realized I had gotten the wrong book, when you click the link, it pulls up this one. But
yeah.
then if you, it's like the soft paper back, and
Yes.
it's like hard copy, which was like half the price or something like that. So then I clicked on that, and it switches it to
the other
the
one.
25th.
Same experience. So even I got I downloaded the Kindle version of the book because I love to have the digital version, which is also different. So there were portions of the book that you may have found that um, were different than in the 10th anniversary copy, and some of the answers were actually in, I don't know, they were offsets in the book, so they weren't in the main content. They were like offset boxes. So if you had different copies of the book, those offset boxes were there because they're like additional information kind of boxes. So we had to give out the answers to a number of questions that were already in your. So if you didn't get those and turn your study guide in, let me know, and we'll give you credit for those because we gave out those answers in the Google Classroom. So if you didn't get those, we'll give you credit for it. Please let me know. That goes for you guys too. So we want to make sure that that's why we gave out those answers. We're always helping you with answers if you ever need them because it's not, we don't really want to, it's not like we're sitting here hoping you get these answers wrong. We want you to have the best information possible. So many people ask the question, why are we talking about leadership? Aren't we going to be pastors? Shouldn't we talk about the Bible? And I really believe that as the pastor, the best thing we can give people is the scripture. Understanding what the Bible has to say and the teachings of Jesus and communicating them properly is what we should do. So why even talk about leadership? And and some people think it's a distraction. I have a pastor, a friend of mine, who hates leadership talks, absolutely hates leadership talks because he's like, we shouldn't be talking about leadership. The church is so focused on leadership. We should be focused on Jesus. I'm like, I understand. I understand what you're saying. I know sometimes we go a little bit overboard. Um, but I really think that if we can become better leaders and communicators, we can help people understand who Jesus is better. And so leadership does actually play a role in your ministry as a pastor, in the ministry that you have, whether it's being a lead pastor or a youth pastor or come alongside being a missionary, whatever your role is, being a good leader helps you. It helps you develop better teams. It helps you to cast vision. It helps you do some things. So we're going to talk about some things, hopefully, that at the end of this class, you'll actually have some more tools that you can be more aware of who you are, maybe some things you need to work on, but also to lean into some skills that maybe you naturally have that can really be used for powerfully for the gospel. So this isn't a distraction. This is really a good, to me, it gives you more tools in your tool chest for reaching people for Jesus. So I think it's all good. All right. So we're going to start into law number 1. And I focus really, the first 4 chapters, I'm really going to hit hard because I really think there's a lot of really good stuff. And not that there's not in the last 16. Okay. But the first 4 chapters are really, really good. So we're going to talk about the law of the lid. Now, it's notice that's underlined. I don't know if you can see that at home, but it says the law of lid is a principle that states leadership ability determines a person's level of effectiveness. So let's say you had a multiple choice question. It said law of lid on one side, and it had this definition of persons determines a person's level of effectiveness on the other side. That would match that. See, that's what you'd have to do for that particular answer. For just saying that could happen. Potentially that could happen. So, and you'll find that a lot with our laws and our definitions. That's going to be a lot of the questions and answers that you have on your test. So just be aware of that. Um, Basically, the law of the lid states that the ability you have to lead, the totality of that ability you're going to be limited by that lid. So the less leadership ability you have, the less ability you have to lead people. And so we want to encourage you to really to raise your leadership lid. So what you're doing today by being a part of this class to me is really allowing yourself to say, I'm allowing my leadership potential to grow a little bit. And by being here today, that's kind of what you're doing. You sign up maybe for other reasons, but the idea is if you're giving time to add to your concept of how to lead, how to be a better leader, you're actually expanding that leadership lid. So you're actually growing a little bit, and that's really important. So I want to talk a little bit about McDonald's, mostly because I'm hungry. Not really true. Did you guys ever watch the movie The Founder? Did you ever see that movie with Michael Keaton? If I didn't, I mean, not that I'm a big movie buff, but it's kind of almost like a documentary. It wasn't really, but it was very interesting to me. Um, and it's about the McDonald's brothers. There were two brothers, Dick and Maurice. I think they call him Mac in the movie. And they had started the first McDonald's, I think in Pasadena, California. So they started this first McDonald's, and they wanted to create a restaurant that could provide food quickly. So up until that time, most of the restaurants that were fast food restaurants weren't fast food restaurants; they were drive-ins. And so they had huge different variety of menus and different things, and it could take you 20, 30 minutes, 40 minutes to get your food at a drive-in. And so they said, this isn't right. What if we could provide, they basically looked at their menu and said, what are the three best-selling items that we have? It was hamburgers, French fries, and Coca-Cola. They said, what if we just offer those three things? And by the way, you look at marketing today, a lot of restaurants are going back to that. What are the best selling things that we have? And let's just focus on a small menu that could be done well and done quickly. People are doing that again today. And that's really what they did. And they changed the whole format of their restaurant to so that they could go from a burger on the grill to in a package in less than I think 30 seconds or a minute that they could have that done. So the time you make your order, that burger is in your hands within 30 seconds to a minute. And that was revolutionary. It was a revolutionary thing for them to do. They designed everything, and they themselves, the two brothers, they were only able to create about 10 franchise restaurants in the whole time because they really wanted to keep quality control over these restaurants, and they couldn't keep control and have a lot of franchises because the more franchises they had, the less control they had, and they couldn't figure out a way to do that. So they only franchised 10 restaurants. Well, a guy named Ray Kroc comes in. He's a salesman, and he looked at what the model of McDonald's was, and he said, "Hey, this you guys should franchise this." And he goes, "Well, we tried it; it really wasn't successful." He came in and he started within 4 years. He franchised 100 restaurants within 4 years of having an agreement with them. And today, McDonald's has 38,000 restaurants worldwide and did $170 billion of cholesterol last year. It's phenomenal, but it took a different leader to take the organization to a different level. So you had these leaders who were brilliant and creative and innovative, but they couldn't move that innovation forward. It took another leader. So, and because their lid was only the side, they wanted to control everything. Ray Kroc found different ways to exert that control than the brothers could. And through that, McDonald's actually still pretty successful even today. I mean, nobody likes to admit they ate at McDonald's, but we all have. So, okay. I think they have the best breakfast, honestly. Their breakfast is decent. Okay. So here's the big question. So what happens if I don't raise my leadership ability? And this is underlined here. To change the direction of the organization, what needs to be changed? Oftentimes it's the leader. Um, so a different leader can bring a different level of a different lid. And so that's what happened with McDonald's. You had a different leader come in and he was able to do different things than the brothers actually themselves could do. So they needed a change in leadership to really expand the way that they did. Now you can argue whether or not that expansion was good or bad, but the reality was McDonald's has changed the way all of us eat forever. I mean, fast food was born out of that restaurant, and it's interesting. So, um, So with the right leader, you can take an organization further. So we need to choose to raise our own leadership ability by investing in our leadership limits. So you have to say, what do I need to change about myself? What can I do differently? How can I see things differently? And if you do that, if you have that kind of self-reflection, it can really help you to do that. So, um, all right, let's go to number two. So this is the law of influence. Now, what is the true measure of uh, what's the true measure of leadership? It's influence. Now you'll see the picture of the little Mother Teresa up there. That's who's up there. She was, if you read the book, she was the opening illustration of influence. She was a nun, a Catholic nun, serving in India in probably one of the poorest communities in the world. Um, Usually, you don't know those people, right? I mean, there's people today serving in the poorest communities of India. We don't even know their names. How did someone like her become a world renowned figure? And it's because of influence. It's because of who she was. It's because of the character that she had. Um, she truly was a person who had influence for us to even know who she is. Because most people labor in anonymity, but because of who she was and because of the decisions that she made and because of the passion that she had, people around the world know who she is. So there's really, influence is a powerful tool when you are a leader, to understand it. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that. Okay, there's five myths. There's none of these are underlined, but just because they're not underlined doesn't mean they're not important. Okay, so five myths about leadership and influence. So management. When we talk about leadership, these are different kinds of leadership styles that people have. Management means to keep and maintain direction, unable to create positive change. So when you talk about from a ministry concept, there are some pastors that are managers. They're basically there to kind of maintain everything. And I believe that as a pastor, God hasn't called you to be a manager. He's called you to be a visionary leader. In other words, he's called you to see things that currently aren't in process where you are, and he's guiding you to where you should be. So I know a lot of people have issues with seeing themselves as visionaries because they're like, I don't see myself. We think of visionary leaders like a Steve Jobs, people who create things that never existed before. But I really think the longer that you're in a ministry position, the more vision God will give you for the church and the context that you're in. And I think a lot of times it's not the fact you don't have vision, it's the fear of stepping into that vision that keeps us from doing what God wants us to do. So fear is a lot of it to me. And so it's easier to manage. It's easier to manage people. Say, hey, we're doing good, we're sustaining. It's interesting how sustaining makes us feel good. We're not going down. That's great, but that's not what God's called us to do. God's called us not just to not go on. He hasn't called us to tread water. He's called us to take back something that's been lost. And so I just want to encourage you, just don't let a manager mentality overtake you in your ministry calling because God hasn't called you to be a manager. The second thing is an entrepreneur. Entrepreneurs are skilled at seeing opportunities, but they don't always have influence. So, in other words, you can be an entrepreneur, you can see things. And I've seen a lot of people that have dreams about what could be, but they never can realize them. And entrepreneurs, they can be successful in one area, but if you know, most entrepreneurs, when they step out of their original area, they're not as successful. Michael Jordan, for instance, he played basketball. You know that, Michael Jordan. You know what other sport he played beside basketball? He was a baseball player for a while. Was he a great baseball player? Not really. He was average. He wasn't bad, but he wasn't great. And a lot of times, you can, as an entrepreneur, you can say, "Hey, if I did this, I could step into this." And sometimes you can't. Sometimes your thing is your thing, and you need to stick with your thing. He eventually, by the way, went back to basketball because that was his thing, and he won a national championship. Good job. So, third leadership style is knowledge. So you can know a lot. Knowledge is power, but it's not necessarily influence. You can know a lot, but that doesn't mean you can do a lot, accomplish a lot. Third is the pioneer. Fourth is the pioneer. These are people who are starting something brand new. So it's a little bit different than the entrepreneur along the same lines. But just because you're willing to start new doesn't mean you're the most influential person. So, for instance, you can be on a church board. A lot of times, you can have a pastor there, but you can have people who are serving on your board that have more influence in the church than the pastor has. So, in your context, even though you're the leader, there are people around you that have more influence in the ministry that you have than you do. So you have to recognize that. Even if you're out front, that doesn't mean you're the person who everybody looks to. So it's important to know who has the influence because people in your context have more influence than you do. And there's nothing wrong with that. Influence takes time. We'll talk a little bit how to develop influence, but influence takes time to develop. So you're always going to have to manage people who are a little more influential. You have to actually get a little more input from them. You have to have a little more communication from them. The last one is position. Position, this to me is the hard thing because a lot of people who are assigned a role, whether it's youth pastor, lead pastor, worship pastor, you think, oh, I have the position, so people should follow me. But there may be other people in that organization that other people look to first before they look to you. And a lot of conflicts happen because people are like, hey, you need to ask me this question. But you have to realize if you don't have the influence, those questions aren't naturally coming to you. They're going to the person who has the influence. So sometimes we get upset because people aren't clearing things with us, but it's not an issue of your position, it's an issue of influence. And you have to grow in your influence. And as you grow in your influence, people will start asking you these things. And it usually takes time, by the way. Um, in 5 years, whoever was previously leading will not be known anymore. And it doesn't matter what the context is, and people will be drawn to you and they'll be loyal to you because you have the influence. Longevity brings a lot of influence in people's lives. It's not the sole thing, but it does help. So um, just remember that the real leader may not be the one in charge. Okay. So just because they're the leader doesn't mean they're in charge. And that's true for us too. Okay. Here we go. 7 factors that come into play. Allowing some appointed to emerge as true leaders. So these are things that I think will determine these factors determine influence. So these factors in your life will determine how influential you are. Number one is character, who you are. So your character, if people feel like they know you and you're authentic and you're real, they can trust you. And that will help you have influence in your lives. If they're not sure about you, you'll never have influence on them. And character is what the first thing people should recognize as us as pastors, who we are. They should recognize our people character. Number two is relationships, who you know. You don't think that matters, but to me, it's really interesting how we get positions based on relationships. Relationship positions. Like if you had to, my brother-in-law, Tanda's brother Trevor, his mother-in-law was a United States Congresswoman for the state of Colorado. And um, it was, she went to Washington, D.C. Washington, D.C. is not a Christian place. It's not. And when she got there, she needed someone that she trusted to be her chief of staff. And so who do you think she picked? She picked someone that she knew who had a good relationship with her, who could speak for her, who knew who she was. And that's who her um, her chief of staff was. And in that environment, she needed someone that she could trust. That relationship is important. Relationships are important for you too. The more people you know, um, and that just helps you. So I just encourage you that making relationships is really important in influence. Number three is knowledge, what people know. Um, so how when you look at people and you're trying to figure out like who to put on your team, getting people with knowledge is also important too. Even if they're people that disagree with you, you don't want someone who's constantly disagreeing with you. But I find as leaders, sometimes we don't like naysayers. We don't like people who give us the opposite perspective. Um, because we're like, you're just like, they're like joy killers. The people who say, oh, I don't like that idea. You're like, oh, I don't like you for saying that. I don't like that idea. Right. But you look at these people and you're like, sometimes people um, process things differently, and different people with different processors actually can help you avoid mistakes if you're willing to listen to them. So sometimes having someone with a different knowledge perspective, that a lot of times we're fearful of putting people with knowledge on our teams because we want to be the ones with the authority. And so we figure someone knows more, then all of a sudden we don't have the authority. But if we do that, we're actually increasing our influence because we're saying we don't know. And that's a good thing. Actually, it's not a bad thing. Intuition, we're going to talk about the law of intuition later. But some people just know how to navigate things instinctively. And if you can put people around you that can do that, that's actually helpful. Number three is experience, or number five is experience. These are people who have been through some similar things. It's always good to have people on your team that know, that kind of been through it before, that can add value to you. Past successes is kind of the same thing. That's the fruit of experience to me. Usually have failures and successes in your past. Um, what they've accomplished can be helpful. And lastly, is ability, what people can do. So if you look at these things, putting these people on your team not only helps uh, you recognize their influence, but also it helps raise your influence as a leader if you do both those things. If that makes sense. All right. Um, Abraham Lincoln, by the way, this is one of the illustrations in the book. He began the Black Hawk War as a captain, and when he finished, he was a private. That's not how that works usually. You don't start as a commissioned officer and end basically as a grunt soldier. That was Abraham Lincoln. That was our president. And as as he learned how to be a better leader, he became a state legislature, U.S. House of Representative member, and eventually he became president. So he learned how to leverage influence, and and then he was killed. So how great was that? So that story didn't have a happy ending. So I don't want to be an influence leader. Yeah, no, it's good. So it is, influence is really important what you do, and it's not something that you're just granted because of your position. You actually have to work on it relationally with people, and we're going to talk about a lot of these laws. Kind of to me, they interact a little bit. So as we talk about working with people and the law of relationships and different things, you're going to find that those relationships really, I think, feed into influence. And you you do have influence in the ministry and the position that you hold right now. You all have influence. Okay, even if it's a little or a lot, you all have influence. All of us have influence over some people, and so we have to learn to use that well. All right, number three is the law of process. This is underlined, by the way. Leadership develops daily, not in a day. So, what is the law of process? Leadership develops daily. If you think about process is day by day, you're developing something, you're getting better at something. Okay. So, um, leaders are learners. Pastor Alex always says leaders are readers, that's one of his big things. You get better when you're intentional about getting better. So you have to choose to do that. So if you um, as a as a leader, if you're not a reader, if you're not engaged in doing something like that, I would just encourage you. Number one, you should be reading the Bible every day, which I think is really simple. I have YouVersion Bible. I do a Bible through the Bible plan every day, and Tan and I read the same Bible thing every day. So we read the same thing every day. Not the same passage, but we read the same passages every day. And it's really helpful for us in our relationship as husband and wife, but also it's also really helpful because we're getting that scripture in us every day. And if you're not reading external sources, I'd encourage you to just make sure you're doing that every day. And it's easy to do. 15 minutes a day, you can read through the Bible in a year easily. So it's not a huge use of your time. You can do it when you're working out. You can do it when you're riding in the car. It's just so easy today. Um, and beyond that, I would encourage you, like if you want to get an Audible subscription, ask people that you look up to in a spirit from a spiritual way. Say, hey, what book are you reading? What's a great book that I can listen to on Audible? It's like $15 a month for an Audible subscription, and you can do one book a month, and you could listen to it. It's like about 7 hours on average. It's anywhere between 5 and 7 hours for a book, and that will help you become a better leader. I've read a lot of leadership books, kind of a little burnout on leadership books right now, so I'm going a different direction. than just strict leadership books, but um, there's a lot of good material out there for you to develop yourself. So you're not going to be a better, the only way you get to become a better leader is if you're intentionally doing something day by day. That's the process part. Okay. So there's 5 phases of leadership growth. And you'll notice that 2 of those are underlined. These are number 1 is the phase I don't know what I don't know. So you might want to know that you don't know what you don't know. You have to understand there are things, and this seems kind of elementary. There's things in this life that you really don't know. That's okay. We all get that. But sometimes we really don't understand that. It's okay to not know what you don't know. So you may know that, but it's okay that you don't know that. Okay. So that's the first thing. Second phase is I know what I need to know. So in other words, I know that I need to know. So in other words, in order to be a better leader, I need to recognize I need to invest in this. Right? That's what it means. So you understand, I don't know it. And some people are like, I don't know it, and that's okay. And they just go on with life saying, I don't have a responsibility to learn it. That's not actually right. So I don't know what I don't know, but the next one is I need to know that. How do I have a blind spot in my leadership, I have a blind spot in my ministry. How do I fix that? So I have to invest in that. I have to learn that it's okay for me to do that. Okay. Uh, the third phase, this is another one that's really important. Um, number 28, for instance. It says this, it says, I know what I don't know. So all of a sudden you go from not knowing what you don't know to now I know what I don't know. I recognize this. So I recognize this is what I need to learn. This is what I'm investing in. And then the next phase is I know and grow, and it starts to show. So now you're learning it. You've got the knowledge, and now you're getting the application part of it. You're starting to apply what you know. And then the last phase, I simply go because of what I know. So now it's just a part of you. And that's the phases of leadership. So as you get exposed to different things, God's going to challenge you not to be okay with where you are, but you actually have to be intentional about adding a level of leadership to you. That's the law of the lid. You're adding to that. Your lid is getting higher, so you have more opportunities to lead, and that's kind of what you're doing. Okay, does that make sense? Teddy Roosevelt, you know him? I don't know if you know. To me, Teddy Roosevelt is the toughest of the toughest guys. I mean, of all the presidents we had, toe to toe, I don't know if anybody could go with Teddy Roosevelt, right? I mean, he was a rough rider, and that literally, those guys were tough. But I don't know if you knew this about Teddy Roosevelt. I think they said this. He was weak and asthmatic as a kid. So he had asthma, which in those days, I don't even know. I mean, and he was weak, and his father told him that if he had a great mind, but if he didn't develop his body, he wouldn't be worth anything. So he had to develop his body and his mind. And so at 12 years old, he was challenged with that. And he really actually took that to heart. By the time he graduated from Harvard, he was a fearless man who could hold his own against the world. So he totally transformed who he was because he had a challenge to be better than what he was. Um, and he was a cowboy, rough rider, vice president, and 6 months later, he became the president of the United States. So, uh, so develop your body and mind. So there are things. I know you guys are fitness people, big fitness people, and you understand the value of that. It's not just the mind, but the body and the mind together is a powerful thing. If you develop both of those things, it does help you. I mean, you talk about the emotional dysfunction. There's something about exercise that counteracts that. There's something about getting engaged in your body that helps your mind mentally. It really does blow away a fog. I mean, I'm totally convinced that getting engaged in your body helps your mind. And that's proven out by Teddy Roosevelt. So really interesting. All right. We are going to continue on to number. Oh, got to get coffee break. That's okay. Coffee break. This next one. This is my favorite chapter. I don't know if it's your favorite chapter, but I love the law of navigation. Um, it relates to me the to ministry. It talks about the importance of vision in leadership. That's why I like it, because it really says anyone can steer the ship, but it takes a leader to chart the course. All right. So the law of navigation, anyone can steer the ship, but it takes a leader to chart the course, and that's vision, right? So anybody can get behind the wheel and just go, okay, this is fun, but that's not what God's called us to do. He hasn't called us just to steer. He's called us to say, where are we going as a church? And that's why I like this chapter, because I really believe that God has innately given every person engaged in ministry vision. Vision is not something that only a few people have. They're the elites. That's a lie. The more you do ministry, the more vision God will give you. And I think that's true no matter what. If you're a campus pastor, if you're a youth pastor, lead pastor, whatever your position is, God's going to give you vision for that ministry. And the big thing is you need to step into that. The illustration they gave in the book is this race to Antarctica. So you had the Norwegians versus the Brits, the first one to get to the South Pole. What a race that they had. Um, it's it's interesting because you had Amundsen, the Norwegian, versus Scott, the Brit. Okay, so the Norwegians, what they did is they studied, okay, how are the people navigating at the South Pole? I mean, how do people get around? So they use dog sleds because that's what they saw that the people who live there, that's what they used. And they basically went in and created refueling stations along the way. They created those so that when they were going to go to the South Pole, they had places to resupply all the way along the way. So they created their own resupply stations. And at the end of the day, um, they actually got to the South Pole, and the only problem they had was a man who had an infected tooth. They got to the South Pole, planted their flag, and the only because there's a race, right? So that the Norwegians, and I'm Norwegian, don't hate me, Switzerland. I'm a Norwegian by birth, so way to go. That's my people. But we're also Vikings, so you get that too. Um, but you've got these guys that so because of their planning, because they had an idea of what they need to do, how we're going to get there. That's vision. Vision is just this is what our goal is, but also how are we going to get there? So we created all these steps. The British people, they decided the best way to go forward was to create motorized sledges. So they had these basically big platforms that they used that could move, and they had horses. They used ponies. So they had ponies and they had these motorized tools, so that way, they could get around. But the motors never worked properly. Horses, by the way, don't do well in super sub-zero temperatures, so they ended up killing all the horses at the end. Instead of actually the sledges had all broken down, they ended up pushing the sledges. So they had these things to help them. They ended up having to physically push them. All of them were had frostbite. All of them they became snowblind. They didn't plan their refueling stations. They brought all their supplies with them for the whole journey. So at the end, they became dehydrated. All of them died 150 miles from their base camp at the end. All of them died. Matter of fact, I don't know if it was in the book or somewhere else I read that one of the guys said he came in and just looked at him and said, I'm just going to go outside. And he never came back because he just realized they weren't going to make it. So he just went out and froze to death. Sad story. Yeah, that's a sad story. But we talk about charting the course and navigating. If we properly plan the course and we say, okay, Lord, this is where you want me to take me. How do I get there? And you allow God to help you, show you how you can get to from A to B. I think at the end of the day, you're going to be successful. If you just think, oh, the Lord will help us as we go, we're just going to plan ourselves. I don't know. They had a plan. It just wasn't a good plan. The British had a plan. It just wasn't a good plan. It wasn't related to the environment that they were in. It wasn't thinking about the challenges that they had to face. They thought they had a plan to face it, but it wasn't a good plan. They all ended up dying. So if you think about that, charting the course for us in ministry is really important that we have a really good feel for where we're going to go. And by the way, if you find that you're not being successful, what you need to do is you need to change something. These guys didn't have to push these sledges, by the way, but that's what they chose to do because they were so connected to the modality of what they had chosen. They were enslaved to it. So instead of abandoning the sledges, they started putting them, which took all their energy. Had they not done that, they probably would have been more likely to survive. Okay. So sometimes you're so enslaved to your system that at the end of the day, you end up going, well, I can't change now. I'm too far in. And then you die there. So don't do that. Just if you recognize that you need to change your course, changing your modality isn't changing your destiny. It's just changing the way you get there. Okay. And you always have to have the freedom to say, I'm going to change something about what I'm doing because what I'm doing is not working. Let me change that to get me where I'm going to go. God's never going to give you a perfect plan to get exactly where you need to go. You know how I know that? Because Paul didn't have that experience. And you look at Acts 16, Paul is trying to get to Asia, and God tells him no. 3 times. Lord says no. He can't go. He's actually trying to get to Europe. No, he's trying to get to Asia. And God says, no, you can't go this way. If you look at kind of Paul's Acts 16 journey, he's going through kind of the area of Turkey and he's traveling and he goes, I want to go south. And God says, no, you can't go south. South is where Ephesus would have been. It's some of Paul's most successful ministry was in that area. And God didn't allow him to go there in his second missionary journey, not until to the end and then the beginning of the third. So he said no to that. So he ended up to keep going up and he goes, I know we'll go north. That's where God, and God said, no, I don't want you going north either. So the only place that Paul could actually go was west because everything else was closed to him. And he gets to this one city, which is a coastal city on a port, and there's no more west he can go because he's at the ocean. It's like, I'm done. I don't know where else to go. And it was there that Paul got a vision from the man in Macedonia saying, hey, I want you to come and I want you to help me. So they had got on a boat and they went across the strait to go to Macedonia. And there he met a number of women at a place when he was worshiping, and he led them to Christ, which is really interesting because his vision was, I'm going to meet a man from Macedonia, and he met women. So I only tell you that because sometimes we're so enslaved to what we think God is telling us that we can't embrace what God is doing in us and through us. So just realize, just because your vision was different than the way it turned out doesn't mean that God didn't use the vision to get you where you needed to be. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. That's charting your course. Sometimes we're arguing with God saying, my end result wasn't what you promised me. Now, did Paul reach men? Yes. But I think it's interesting his first converts were women. Because that didn't match at all what God had showed him. And yet he embraced it and got through that actually that changed world history. I think I've said that before. If Paul wouldn't have gone to Europe and evangelize Europe and cause Europe to be a Christian nation, Islam would have been the dominant force in Europe instead of Christianity. Which, by the way, Islam is now almost the dominant force in Europe over Christianity today. So, but if there's no Christian Europe, there's no Christian United States. So all those decisions were mind-blowingly important. Okay, so that's charting the course. Okay, so what three tensions? I got to get going here. What three tensions must be balanced to be effective as a navigating leader? There's three here. One's underlined though, so optimism and realism. So optimism is the idea that we can do this. Realism is these are our limits. This is what we can do, can't do. So if you're navigating, you got some people who believe we can do anything, and you have some people believe that no matter what we do, it's going to be awful. So optimism and realism. He didn't say pessimism, which I appreciate. Pessimism is the opposite of optimism, but a lot of people are realists, and realism is saying these are the challenges. Okay, you need realists on your team, not just optimists. Optimists will tell you everything is going to be great. And then when everything's not great, they'll look at you and say, how come you did it wrong? Thanks. Right. So you need realists on your team, but that's the balance of saying we can do this, but we also have these challenges. This is what we need to do. Secondly, is intuition versus planning. Some people say, I feel like this is the way we should go, and feelings are great, but you also need to have a plan. So you can't say we're going to plan and not listen to people who say, I don't know about that. How many times I've made decisions and how I felt has had an impact on my planning. Because I think you need to listen to both those things. You can't listen to one and exclude the other. And the last is faith and fact. And this is the one that would say this is a to help you to be a navigating leader, this is a tension you have to balance, is the idea of yes, Jesus can do everything, but he also wants us to do these things. Faith and fact. So faith, it's not that you're saying you can't overcome things, but sometimes you have to recognize that you have a situation and you also have faith and you have to, it's a blending of both. It's not one or the other. So does that make sense? Do you guys have any questions about that so far? I've been talking a lot. I've been talking a lot. Do you guys have any questions? Okay. No questions from them. So I did ask. Uh so what are some major barriers to successful planning? And again, this is one is underlined, the lack of imagination is one. Right? What are the major barriers? Fear of change. So you talk about planning. Um, a lot of times people like to change the status quo, so they don't like to do something different. Even if the status quo is not working, the status quo is safe. So a lot of people will resist a change that you want to bring because even if where they're at isn't good, because they know what's not good. They don't know what you're talking about. So we talk about successfully planning and saying this is what we need to do, trying to bring change. That's really hard for a lot of people to accept. Um, Secondly, ignorance, because people don't know. They just don't know. So you're trying to change something like, I don't know. I don't know if that's really what I want to do. Number three is the uncertainty about the future. If we do this, what does that mean for the long term? I'd rather be it's status quo than to think about how this may affect me adversely in the future. And lastly, a lack of imagination because they're just like, I don't want to. I'm okay with where I'm at. I don't want to have to think about something different. I don't want to think about that. Um, so if you don't have it, if you're not able to think about a challenge or change, you're not going to be able to do it. So you think about all those things, even in your own heart. A lot of times, I really think that reason we don't follow the vision God's placed in our heart is, I think, is a fear of change, and I think uncertainty about the future makes us pause to say, I don't want to execute the visions God's given me because I'm afraid. Fear is the biggest thing that's stopping you from doing what God wants you to do. You have to step out. When I became superintendent, this is my fifth year in this position, in this role. When I first sat in this chair with my first presbytery meeting around this table, I shared with the presbyters, I really feel like God wants us to plant 10 churches in 10 years, which doesn't seem like a big deal. Maybe it seems like a big deal. It seems like a big deal to me because that's a lot. Because we planted like maybe 2 churches or 3 churches in the last decade. So to plant 10 churches in 10 years is a lot. And to share that was hard to do because once you share something like that, you're accountable for it, right? So most of us choose not to share it. We're like, I'll just keep it between me and Jesus and we'll make it happen. But there's something life-giving about sharing vision that really, to me, empowers people and encourages people. People will get around a vision more than they will get around the status quo. There's nothing exciting about the status quo. Nothing. It's just the way it always is. But if God's put a vision in your heart, He say, God wants us to reach 50 people in the next year. He wants us to reach 50 new people in the next year. All of a sudden, people are like, whoa, that's something that now I've got an objective, I've got a goal, we're moving direction, we've got a way to do it. I mean, there's something exciting about vision when you speak it. And I want to encourage you guys, if God's put vision in your heart, begin to speak it. And yes, there's accountability for it. If Manasseh says, hey, I want to be in the mission field in 3 years, well, the clock is ticking now, right? That's a big deal. But when you speak vision, all of a sudden, to me, there's not only accountability for it, but you're empowered to accomplish it now because it's out there. And it's the worst thing in the world to speak it out because you're so scared. What if it doesn't happen? That's the big question. What if it doesn't happen? Well, it will never happen if you never say anything. So I would just encourage you, if you look at those things, that can stop you from really accomplishing navigating your course. All right. So I'm going to do one more. We'll get to number 5. We only have 20. We're halfway through. So the rest of them are faster. The first 5 are a lot. Okay. Um, what is law of addition? Leaders add value by serving others. So we prioritize helping people to get where they need to get them where they need to be. Okay. 90% of all people who add value to others do so intentionally. One of our jobs is to add value to people. Our jobs as ministers isn't just to take from people, it's to add to them. It's to help them to be better. So the best way to do that, the best way to add value to people is to get to know them. You can't add value to people you don't know. So you have to find out what their priorities are. This is investing in people. This is really what the law of addition is. You're investing in people. A lot of times when we talk about leadership, it always seems like we're talking about how we can use our resources to accomplish what we want. And if you're not abiding by this law, if you're not adding value to people, you'll never have people to lead. People will never follow you. So you have to prioritize people. So there's 4 ways that we can add value to other people. So way number 1, we can add value to others when we truly value others. So the key word there is truly. You're never going to add value to people if you don't really care about them. So in order for you to add value to people, you have to really care about them. Secondly, way we add value to others is when we make ourselves more valuable to others. So in other words, when it's not just that we truly value them, but we become a resource for them. Like there's someone we can call. Like they can call us, they can ask us questions. They can say, "Hey, I don't know what to do about this." When you do that, you're adding value to others. Number 3, when you know and you can relate to what others value. So everybody has different kind of values, and you're not going to match everybody else's values because that's just the way it is. But when you can relate to them, relating is saying, I don't understand what your value is. I mean, you guys work with teenagers, they have different value systems, and sometimes it's really hard to relate to where they're where they're at. But at the same time, you think about it, um, you may not understand it, but you can relate to that because you were young ones too, and you had your own values that may not be the same, but you can understand what it's like to value something that maybe not looking back, you say, well, that's not that important now, but it was then. And so understanding that and being able to relate to people, because if they feel like you hear them, that matters to them. Because even if you don't understand, if at least if you can hear them, that matters. Um, that's I'm going through a issue. I just had colon cancer removed in July. So last time I did this, I just had surgery. And then I had surgery on Wednesday to put a port in. So I got a nice Frankenstein cut on my clavicle, which is awesome. But people ask me, they say, Pastor, why are you going through all this stuff? Like, why is that? Why are you? Someone asked me that and goes, why do you think God's letting you go through all these things? And I said, my first answer is the answer identification. It's my first answer. And I really feel like this. Jesus in Hebrews 4, it says, we have not a high priest who was not touched with the feeling of infirmities, but was tempted in all points like as we are, yet without sin. So what that means is that Jesus has been through everything we've been through. And the reason that that's encouraging in Hebrews 4 is it's a point of identification. Jesus knows what you're feeling. The reason we can go, and it says in verse, I think it's 16, I think it's 14, 16, it says, let us therefore come boldly before the throne of grace, where we can obtain mercy and grace to help in our time of need. Why can we boldly come before God when we have a need? Is because Jesus identifies with us. So when I'm going through this is a form of identification so that other people who are going through the same thing later on in their life can see and say, hey, can I ask you a question because you've been through this? What is that chemotherapy like? I start on Monday. I start chemotherapy. So looking forward to that, right? But you look at all this and you go, why am I going through this? Because someday I have a story that I can relate to someone else who's going through the same journey, who needs encouragement that they can make it through the journey, and that God is still with them in the midst of it. And that it's not because of something that they did that was wrong. It's not because of something that they did because they were sinful when they were 12. And I hear all this from people. I'm like, guys, sometimes things happen in life. God just wants us to go through these things because Jesus went through it. He didn't have to. Jesus didn't do anything wrong to go through all the things he went through, but he did it because of what he wanted to identify with us. And sometimes we go through things in life that are bad because it gives us points of identification with others to help them through their journey. So when you talk about relating to people, that's kind of what we're talking about. God gives us, we're adding value to people. We say, hey, I've been through that before. I know what that feels like. All of a sudden, that changes the way they view you, and it changes the way they view their situation because they have hope now where they didn't have it before. That's part of leaders. As leaders, we're trying to give people hope. We're trying to help them to understand that where they are isn't where they will be forever. This is a season they're going through. I'm going through a season in my own life. I'm going to get to the other side of it, and I'm going to be fine. But it is a season that I'm going through, and I'm going through it, and I'm going to go through it because I know that Jesus is going to use this season in my life to bring glory to him in someone else's life. And that's okay. That's okay. Um, Sometimes God heals, and sometimes he has us go through, the scripture doesn't say God always delivers us. We always pray, Lord, deliver us from evil. But sometimes we go through bad things. You think what happened this past weekend with Charlie Kirk. Here's a guy who preached the gospel and he was killed. That's horrible. And yet you look at that and you go, how does God get glory out? God gets glory out of all those things. And God works all things for good. Doesn't mean all things are good. It just means that God can bring glory out of everything, even the bad things that we experience. And lastly, the last way we can add value to others is when we do things that God values. That's the easy one. When you're honoring God with your life and who you are, you're going to add value to people because you're setting a standard for people that a lot of times they don't think exists. They don't, people around you are looking for authentic believers. They're looking for people who really love Jesus. And if you represent that to them, you give people hope that they can actually be this person because they're looking around going, there's not a lot of people out there living authentically for Jesus. And so that's kind of the hope that you give them. So your team is more important than any other moving part in your organization. So people don't want to feel used, they want to feel valued. So you think about your team. Think about like if you have a team that you're working with, whether it's at work or whether it's in a church context, you have to value your team. And because if you don't value, if you're using them, they'll stop picking up the phone because they don't. If you, they just feel like I had a youth pastor who years ago, the only time he called people is when he needed something from them, and I noticed that they stopped picking up the phone. But they always picked up the phone for me because I didn't always call them when I needed something. I called them because of them. So if you think about your own team, how you treat your team and how you value them will add will influence loyalty. It'll influence their ability to do things for you. It'll I've always made it as a leader, I've always made my team a priority. So like for me, I always acknowledged all of our birthdays and anniversaries for all of our team members when I was pastoring a church publicly. And I would always tell people we'd always give them a gift publicly on a Sunday, but we also encourage people in the church, hey, it's their anniversary, honor them, bless them. And you know how that helps your team? When you say that in front of everybody, they're like, whoa, that's really, whoa, we're encouraging that. And I would just say, like, look at your own team and say, how can we build a culture of honor in our own team? How can we show people that we honor and value them? Because the more you value your team, the more your team will do anything for you. So, like here in this context, I still do the same thing. We honor people who have birthdays, and we don't do it publicly because that's not the context I'm at anymore. I don't stand up on Sunday morning in the network office and do that. That's not how we operate here. But like when Leif had his birthday, we gave him something. And if you know anything about Leif, he likes to eat meat. So we took him out to Tucanos. You ever been to Tucanos? So Tucanos, they serve like all the meat you can eat, and they just come around with these different skewers of meat. and they put it on your plate and you eat as much as you want. And at the end of the day, you go home in a wheelbarrow. And it's a lot of fun. But for Leif said to me after that meal, he said, "This is the first time I've ever felt full." Which I thought that was just awesome. To have that opportunity to make that young man actually feel like he ate enough was awesome.
Yeah,
Well, he like 15 people in his house. He's probably like, "Oh, that plate is empty the third time around." Um, but anyway, it was just but how do you add value to people on your team? What do they love? What do they need? And everybody's a little bit different. So your job as a leader is not just to lead people, it's also to get to know people and to add value to them and say, "What do you guys need?" Because if you draw from the well where you're like, "I need you to do this, I need you to do that," and you never putting back in, eventually they're going to walk out because they don't feel valued. So one of the best things you can learn as a leader is how to honor and add value to your team. And as you do that, you'll find you have the best team, and that team will do anything for you. And that's not, by the way, you're not manipulating the situation. You're honestly doing what's right. Adding value to your team is the right thing to do. But the benefit of that is loyalty, the ability to do anything for you. They'll help you, they'll come alongside you, they won't say no. Um, there's a lot of value to that. But it starts with you being sincere, saying, how can it's think and being intentional. How can I add value to these people? What can I do? You guys want to take a break? You want to use okay, we're going to take a break right now and then we'll pause and
well, drink most of them.
You think most, you have to make more than once?
Yeah, sometimes I'm in a pot of it.
Did you drink it all and then somebody else wants something?
Someone else wants something, I definitely got it.
all right. Well, we're gonna back. We're at number 6. So we got 21 of these. So we're halfway through. If you divide 21 in half, you get 6. That's the new math right there. Okay, so the law of the solid ground. So what part does trust play? Trust is the solid ground that we're talking about. What part does trust play in the solid ground? It's foundational for leadership. If people don't trust you, they will not follow you. Okay. It's not true of politicians, but everybody else, it is true. If they don't trust you, they won't follow you. It's foundation of leadership is trust. It's the most important element in leadership. If you don't have trust, you don't have anything to offer people, which is true. Maxwell says that we build trust by exhibiting what 3 things? Competence, connection, and character. So competence is I know what I'm talking about. Connection is that we know you and we have a relationship with you. And character is who I am. This is really who I am. So if you want to build trust in people, you have to know what you're doing, you have to be connected to them, and they have to know that you're authentic and real. So that's the most important thing, being authentic. It's the most important thing. So here's something. What does character communicate? These 3 things that character communicates, and I would say it's important. Consistency, potential, and respect. So character is life-giving. So what it produces is CPR. Do you see that? Consistency, potential, and respect. A little CPR for character. Okay, consistency. So that character is, I'm always who I am, no matter where I am. It was that you can follow me because things are usually good. And respect, I understand who you are and where you're coming from. So those 3 things. Okay. All right, we're gonna move on to law number 7. See, I told you we're gonna go a lot faster now. Once we got past the first 4. The law of respect is who do people naturally follow? And this is important to underline here. Leaders stronger than themselves. So who do people naturally follow? They always follow people who are stronger than themselves. They follow better leaders that are stronger than themselves. So a person is always looking for someone who they would consider a higher level of leader to follow. So when you look at churches today, it's amazing. In a lot of churches today, we don't have doctors, we don't have lawyers, and a lot of that has to do with the perceived leadership of churches. So the higher level of leader, the more that you'll see that people will follow you who are higher level leaders. A higher level leader will not step into a situation where they feel like they're not able to learn in that environment. So again, in order for you to retain people who are high-level leaders, you need to be a high-level leader. So if you're not working on it, you're not going to have those people come and be a part of what you're doing. And we need those people to be part of what we're doing. They're actually helpful. So he was actually a eye doctor. What's that? An ophthalmologist, but he was an optometrist, which is the medical doctor. He was a surgeon who came to our church, and part of being uh, an ophthalmologist, I think that's the medical optometrist is the eye doctor, ophthalmologist is the surgeon. So part of being the ophthalmologist, he had to have a general surgery degree in order to have that. So he was actually had a degree in surgery in order to have that specialty. And so he became a part of our church, and he's like, "Hey, I would love to. Would you mind if I like did a class maybe once a month where I just shared people could ask medical questions of me in the course of a Sunday morning, and I'd just be able to respond and kind of answer some of the medical questions. I'm not giving medical advice. That's the disclaimer. But people could ask medical questions about things that they're going through. And so we started doing that as a church. It was really, it empowered someone who was a high level leader, but it also, people loved it because they could ask very interesting questions sometimes about things that were going on very personally in their lives. And we're like, oh, too much, shared too much. But it was really responded really well because people were learning about things that maybe they were going through or someone that they loved were going through that they didn't have the specific details on. And he was just sharing it out of the well of his knowledge. So if you can help a high level leader find a way to utilize their abilities, they'll actually they can actually follow you in that environment. So even if you don't say I'm a higher level leader than that person, I mean, there's always going to be people you're going to look at and say there's so much way up here. But if you allow them an outlet, a lot of times that's all really that they're wanting to do. Most people leave a church because they don't feel that they're being utilized by a church. Sometimes they don't fit with the vision of the church, but a lot of times if they're a high level leader, if you don't utilize their talents, they'll end up going somewhere else where they can be utilized. So if you see someone in your course of ministry that you say, hey, that's a high level leader, the best thing you can do is not necessarily give them a platform, but give them an outlet. Okay, a platform means look at them, look at them. Sometimes they're just looking for an opportunity to serve in some way and to communicate the knowledge and the experience that they have for the benefit of the church. And if you do that, everybody wins. So don't be afraid of that as a leader. There's always going to be people higher than you, and if you enable them and use them, they'll be an asset to you. So, what are the top 6 ways that a leader gains the respect of others? So this is I thought this is really interesting. Natural leadership ability. If you have a natural leadership ability, people will see that, they'll be drawn to that. Secondly, if you have respect for others, people actually like that. Like they'll respect you if you respect them. Courage. This is one of those things where if you're willing to stand out and say, hey, let's go this direction, which we talked about vision, the need to speak vision is courageous. People respond to that because that's uncommon. Courage is uncommon. That's not being a blowhard. That's just being courageous. Okay. Success. People love it when they see success. The best way for you to, as a leader, to have people follow you is to have small successes lead to large successes. So when we came to Payette, this has been 20 years ago. We came from South Dakota, came into the Payette church. The Payette church at that time, the pastor was leaving. They had a school administrator because we have a K through 12 school at the church. The former school administrator had been caught having an affair with a man. That's bad. And so he had stepped down, and then 6 months later, the pastor stepped down. And so in the course leading up to this, they had like 3 different building programs that they were going to do. They're going to build a brand new church, then they were going to remodel the current church, then they were going to they had like all these different kind of plans, and none of them came to fruition. And they'd sold almost everything that the church had, property outside the building. So when we got there, they had nothing left to sell, and the people were really discouraged. And here I come, so excited, And we stepped into that, and the church was still actually there was life there. It was good. It was healthy in that respect. But they were really they're really scared, like, of building, like, because they've been promised all these things and never witnessed it. And so we started off like we did a bathroom remodel project. Took us a week, but we had old school bathrooms. If you've ever been in the old schools with the old bathrooms that they have, they're really not that pleasant. We remodeled all those things, and within 2 weeks, we had new bathrooms. And we did a couple small projects that people really liked. And because of those, we were successful. People realized they could count on us to do what we said we would do in the budget that we said we could do it. And then a year and a half later, we built $100,000, which was like a $300,000 addition where we could have our youth ministry because we had no place for our youth ministry in our building. We had no place for it on Wednesday nights. We were actually renting another building for our youth to have a place to meet because we didn't have a place. So in a church that had been promised a building program for years and never seen one, it was through the little successes that gave us 100%, a unanimous vote. One person was going to vote against us, but she went to the bathroom, so we took the vote, and it was a unanimous vote. It's the way you do that. You just slip something in their coffee, and you're good to go. Get that unanimous vote. It's not what we did. But I'm just telling you that successes, little successes, will help people follow you because they'll realize, hey, if you're going to do this, we believe that you can do the next thing that you're talking about. So you don't have to have big successes. Little successes lead to big successes. So just to encourage you in that. Number three, loyalty.
It must be a lot easier than voice it.
Yeah, it's a lot easier to build in Payette. As a matter of fact, when we built our building, Mike Muscle, thank you, Mike. It was the contractor that we used, and we actually added an entryway which wasn't on the original plan. And the city looked at it and said, "Hey, we didn't see this," and we're like, "Oh, we added that." And they're like, oh, "Okay, that's all right."
Oh,
Yeah.
See, we'd never have that happen. Now, today, if we did that, probably wouldn't have that same thing. But we built it in 2007. We had a little bit of goodwill from the city.
Took 3 years to get our permit.
Yes, yes. Caldwell, Napa. Yeah, it's not Payette, which is nice.
Boise, yeah, but
It's all in who you know. It's all relationships. I knew the mayor, so we leveraged. I knew a couple city council members. We leveraged all that stuff. So top six, leader gains respect. Number two is loyalty. Not only people's loyalty to you, but your loyalty to them. Being loyal to people, standing up for people, defending people, and not defending people who are doing something wrong, but honestly defending people who are doing something right. Being loyal to them. People like that. They respond to that. And lastly, adding value to others, which we talked about at length. If you're interested in other people, it makes people respect you if you're into them. Okay, so what are two ways to measure how much respect you have as a leader? So you'll see one there's underlined over there, just emphasizing that. So the caliber of people who choose to follow you. So measure how much respect you have. What kind of people are following you? What kind of caliber people are following you? In a church context, I'll have you know that not everybody comes to church is a high level person because that's not who Jesus always called. If you look at the disciples, these were not high level leaders for the most part. But I can tell you that God will call whoever will come, and we work with whoever comes. Okay. But you also can look at people and say, hey, I think you can get a caliber of people who are following you if your leadership level is higher than people who may be following the general people in the church because you're raising that level. Secondly, seeing how people respond when you ask for commitment or change. So how much respect do you have as a leader if you see how your people respond when you ask for a commitment or change? So how much respect do they have for you when you say, hey, we're going to change something? If they're willing to follow you, you've got a high level of respect going in that organization, in that ministry. Because if people are going to follow you for change, and that's underlined, by the way, when people respond when you ask for commitment or change, you know that they have respect for you. And as a leader, the longer you're in that role, the more respect that you have, the more character that you're showing, the easier that is. So the earlier on you ask for those changes, the harder it is. As you progress, it gets easier. So it's actually harder for me to ask permission to remodel our bathrooms than it was for me to build a new building because it was early on in the relationship. So they were taking more of a risk then because they didn't know me. But as they found out who I was, they found out that I was going to deliver. That made that a lot easier. So And Payette just celebrated their 100th anniversary as a church last 2 Sundays ago. So they were asking me, when did we build this building? How long has it been here? And I'm like, yeah, 2007, we built that. And it was a journey, it was an adventure. Because they said they weren't going to build a building unless it was a church sanctuary. There are people in the church that said that we will not build anything except a church sanctuary because that's what they'd been promised. And I said, hey guys, let me tell you, we have a church sanctuary right now that if we ran 2 services, we get 500 people in, but I've got no place for my kids, no place for our youth, no place for our children on Sunday morning because we don't have a children's church area. We've got no place for these. Shouldn't we? This is an immediate need, but our church sanctuary isn't an immediate need. Would you guys let us for $100,000? We built this facility. I said $100,000 is not going to affect our ability to build a sanctuary, but it will affect our ability to minister these kids in the coming future. Would you let us do that? 100%, because we framed it for why we were doing it, not just something that we wanted to do. And it was successful. So you guys can do that. You guys can lead it. So when you ask people to change, that's where you're going to find out how much of a leader you are. Oh, this is the law of intuition. Now, the law of intuition, leaders evaluate everything with a leadership bias. That sounds like an interesting way to describe intuition. I would never describe intuition this way. Intuition is the leaders evaluate everything with a leadership bias. But here's what they're saying. Intuition is being able to feel some realities about the organization and know kind of where you're heading and some obstacles that are coming up before anybody else does. So the way you get intuition is by leading. You get intuition by doing things. Okay. You don't have it necessarily always instinctively, but it grows as you operate in a role. Intuition is something that can grow. Now, that doesn't mean you always have it. Not everybody has intuition. You can develop intuition. We'll talk about that. But when we talk about a leadership bias, here's the connection with intuition. The more you lead, the more instinctively you'll know what things are happening. I'm always surprised sometimes how pastors don't know things about their organization. I'm always surprised. Like I would ask someone, what's the trend of your church? Like what's your attendance trend? Like when do you have the most people? When do you have the least people? Do you know that when that is? That's an intuition thing. Like you can know, like on offerings and giving Sundays, what Sundays are the highest giving Sundays, what Sundays are the lowest giving Sundays. For most churches, the highest giving Sundays are, you guys have a guess? The first Sunday. You know why? Because the government pays everybody on the first Sunday. Now, it's not just the government, but it tends to be the first Sunday of the month that's when all the government checks come, but it's when people have the most disposable income because they haven't paid any bills yet. So our church would always ask for missions giving on the first Sunday of the month. Strategic, yes, because we understood that people will give the most when they have the most, and they'll give the least when they have the least, which is what Sunday? The fourth Sunday. Yes. Sometimes the fifth, if they have a fifth Sunday, they might get paid early. So fifth Sunday might actually be the first Sunday, but it's just early. Okay. But the last Sunday of the month, and if you ever worked for a grocery store, you will know grocery stores have that same mentality. If you go to a grocery store and you try to buy something the first week of the month, you will never see a sale. The sales are non-existent. Why? Because they're going to get the most out of you that first month because that's when you have the most. But at the end of the month, if you want to have the best sales, you want to go buy a hamburger instead of paying $8 a pound for hamburger, whatever it is, insanely right now. If you want to buy hamburger, buy it the last week of the month because that's when it'll be the cheapest. Because they'll run the most sales at the end of the month because that's when they have the least amount of business. That's understanding a trend in their business. Understanding trends in your ministry is the same way. You wouldn't want to plan a big event on a Sunday that's been trending downward. Or maybe you do want to plan a big event in order to refill that bad Sunday. Like have a donut Sunday. Churches are doing donut Sundays. Right? Where they give donut Sunday. They have like you guys they like have donut you remember they have like donut displays. You can go pick a donut, or they have a donut stack, like a bunch of donuts on a pole or something, you pull it out, whatever it is. They just have these opportunities to say, hey, we're gonna have a donut Sunday this Sunday, which is a down Sunday, to get people to come in and just be a part of service. Hey, we have free donuts for everybody, but invite your friends. And now you have a trending downward Sunday that becomes an upward Sunday because you didn't invite that Sunday. Pastor Laura at the Rock never does events on Sundays. They never have a Sunday where they don't do something. Okay. Do you really? I think you're making that up. They're always doing stuff. Yeah, yes, that's true.
Maybe tomorrow. Oh,
So I would just say understanding trends and intuition to me is when you talk about leadership bias, you're understanding some things about your organization. Like as a pastor, you're usually 6 months ahead of where your church is. So all of a sudden you'll get intuition is about knowing what's going to happen before it happens. And what happens is people, after a while, you think everybody knows what you know. And the reality is they don't know because they don't have the intuition because of the leadership bias that you have. They don't have the intuition that you have because you've been doing this long enough. So you're anticipating things that nobody else is anticipating. You're saying, hey, if you know that there's a downturn in the economy, you know how that's going to affect you in 6 months. But hey, we shouldn't start a capital campaign today because we're never going to realize that in 6 months because the money's not going to be here. Those type of decisions, you talk to people and they're like, oh, the economy's fine, it's great, no problem. In the church that Tan and I started in South Dakota, we started a church um, in North Sioux City, South Dakota. We pastored there for 13 years, planted the church, built the church. We went from just Tan and I as members to about 100 people in the church, I think. And then what happened is the big computer, Gateway computers, I don't know if you know who they are, Gateway 2000, Gateway computers. They had 5,000 people in there and just working in manufacturing and sales in that community, and they closed their facility within 3 years. So within a year, we lost half the people in the church and a third of the people in the church and half our income in a year because the economy changed. And it was nothing we could do. There's nothing that they just closed the business. And when that happens, you have to adapt to those type of changes. And you can see it coming. You need to be prepared for that. It's not going to have a non-impact on your church. So you have to look at what we're doing, what we're spending. We had to tighten up. I actually got a second job for that season because we didn't have enough money to get paid. So we made those kind of choices proactively because we knew it was coming. And that's really leadership. That's intuition. Okay. So 5 intangibles of leadership that leaders need to lead to read what's going on. Okay. 5 intangibles. So I would say this is one question. So I wouldn't look at it as 5 questions. This is just one question. 5 intangible leadership. They have to know their situation, their trends, their resources, their people, and themselves. So you're kind of looking at where you're at situationally, the trends of the church we talked about, the resources of the church, people, and then themselves. By the way, resources aren't just money and finances. It's also giftings, abilities. It's the resources of people offer in the church that aren't just, it's just not resources. So you have to kind of look at those intangibles. So when you're looking at what's going to happen in the church, these things all come into play. What's happening in your community? What's happening in the attendance of your church? Churches rarely go up and up and up and up and up. And I think sometimes we've been sold this good of church growth seminars that if it's not growing up, it's not doing well. And the reality of church is more of it goes up and then down, up and then down, and you want your ups to be higher and your downs to be lower, so smaller. So that's normal church growth. So what happens is a lot of times people get frustrated as leaders because you're not seeing the straight up. And the reality is no church growth is always up and up and up. There's always going to be a downward turn in the process of your ministry. Someone's going to get mad and leave. Someone's going to decide, someone's going to have to move out of town because something shut down. Like you think about Micron and all the building, they're going to have a ton of new people coming, but all the people who are building the plant right now may not be here. And maybe their kids are in your youth group. Maybe their families are in your church. That's all going to change. So knowing those types of things, you may be able to re-add some of those people that are leaving, but maybe you won't. So it's understanding those things that are happening around you that can help you say, okay, we need to be prepared for this as a church. It's just having a broader mentality and knowing kind of where your church is at, feeling where your budget is. I remember when I came into Payette, they had a budget of $11,000. That was their total budget. And I remember them saying, I'm like, how did you get that budget
For the month?
for the month? $11,000 a month. And we had a school. And I'm like, oh, I don't know how I did that. Anyway, they had this budget, and it's like, I'm like, how did you get to that budget? And they're like, and the treasurer said to me, he goes, I know that's just kind of where I feel that it is. And I'm like, you don't have he didn't have it listed like how much we're spending on this and this. He just that's I think that's kind of how I feel where it is. He was, by the way, we worked out all the numbers. He was exactly right.
What?
He got the nailed it. But I had all the numbers, so he had intuition about where the finances were of the church, but I had to have the numbers, and then from there, when we added things, we changed the budget. We were able to kind of have a budget. I think every church should have a budget. So it's one of those things where it helped us to define what it was, but the intuition was there. So don't doubt that. And by the way, sometimes you know something's up, but you don't know what's up. That's intuition. That's something's going on, but you don't always know what it is. Three major intuition levels. The one I want you to notice is be there, those who are nurtured and understand it. So number one is those who naturally understand it. So you can have intuition that you just kind of naturally understand these things. You just figure these things out. No one has to teach you. But the second one is those who are nurtured to understand. You have to learn. Sometimes you have to learn these things, and then it becomes something you innately know. And I would encourage you, most of us are that way. So there are a few people who just know things instinctively, intuitively. Most of us aren't like that. Most of us have to learn these trends. You can't learn what you're not looking for when it comes to intuition. If you're not looking for it, you'll never learn it. So when you start feeling these things, you got to ask yourself, what are the trans situations, those five things we talked about, that helps you? And lastly, the people who never understand it. So again, the people who never understand are people who never look for it, never realize the importance of it. Intuition can help you a lot because it can help you avoid bad decisions quickly. Because intuition says, you know what? I don't think we should do this yet. And there's no reason for it. There's no rational thing for it. But if you're like saying, I think we should just wait. If you've ever felt like that and said, I don't have any substantive reason why, I just feel like that's intuition. Sometimes don't listen. You have to listen to that. If it's not driven by fear, fear is often will appear very intuitive. Oh, we shouldn't do that now because it's too scary. That's fear. But there's other times where it's like, no, I don't think this is the right time. You can do that as a leader. You can say we need to hold this until the right time. And we'll talk about that too as we go on. All right, number 9 here. Chapter 9, Law of Magnetism. According to law of magnetism, who do you attract? You attract who you are. So people who like you are like you. Okay. People who like you are like you. So for instance, Hannah and I came to Payette. I was 35 years old. That was 20 years ago. Don't do the math. It's too hard. Figure that out. Carry the one. When I came to Payette, I was 35 years old, 4 kids. My youngest was not even 2. Yes, not even 2 years old. And my oldest was 10, I think. So I have I basically have 2 toddlers and then a 8-year-old and a 10-year-old. That's what I have when I came. And to a church whose previous pastor was in his 70s. Okay. So a lot of older people and some younger families, but within 4 years, guess what the church looked like? We had a lot of younger families. Matter of fact, it's amazing. I look back and go, wow, look at all those little kids that were in the church. When Tan and I pastored in North Sioux City, we had, a church of probably about 60, 70 after everybody left. And about a third of our congregation were under 5 because we had kids under the age of 5. And so we had like, somehow we got into the triplets and the twins, like the mother of multiples group met in our church, and we had like twins and triplets everywhere. So that really adds, you have like 3 families, but everybody has like, 6 kids when under the age of 5, that's amazing. We definitely need a nursery worker at that church because it was crazy. But it reflected who we were. So as a leader, it's really interesting. You're going to draw who you are. So let's see here. According to Maxwell, like attracts like. Therefore, if you want to grow an organization, you have to grow leader. If you want to attract better people, you have to become the kind of person that you want to attract. You got that? So you think about this. What's the value? If I want to find someone who's a better leader, I need to make myself a better leader. That's it. If I want to attract people who are more biblical, I need to be more biblical in the way I express things and the way I communicate things. That's like you have to value those things and you have to become that person. As you become that person, you're going to draw more of those people. Sometimes we're like, why am I not drawing these people that I really like? And the reason we're not drawing them is we're not like them. So the more like we can be like them, because to me, you want to draw people that you really aspire to be mostly, don't you? I think you look like, who do you want to come to your organization? You want people like, these are people I really like. And a lot of times those are people that we want to be. So let's try to become those people and then we'll draw those people. So that's the law. 7 areas that are shared by people who follow you. The one that's important for today is the values. People will follow you if they share your values. Okay, it's not just generation, that's how old you are, the place you are in your life, your attitude. And you can see this in churches. By the way, we have such a diverse body. We have 60 churches in our group, in our Southern Idaho Ministry Network right now. And it's interesting, every church has its unique personality. And almost always the personality is tied to the leader. And as a pastor, the leader that you are is the church. That's who the church will be in 5 years. Okay. So the leader that you are that's who your followers will be in 5 years. Yeah. So you think about that. And it's true. It's because they share, if you share values, that doesn't mean they're going to be carbon copies of you, but they're going to be like you as far as what they value, the age, attitude, background. And that doesn't mean they're going to always be the generation, because you can have a diversity of generation on your staff, but it's the idea that who you are is who they will be. You have some churches that are like apolitical, where they don't talk about politics. We have some churches that are very political, and the people in those churches are in that genre. So if you have an apolitical pastor, you have an apolitical congregation. If you have a very political pastor, you have a very political congregation, because that's reflective of who you are. Background, it's interesting. You ever wonder why a lot of churches have pastors that got saved later in life, maybe came from the drug culture and stuff? You'll find a lot of people in that church have had that same experience because they're drawn to the leader who's representing the ability for them to transition out of that lifestyle into the lifestyle that God has for them. So you see that. It doesn't mean you have to use drugs in order to minister to people who haven't used drugs, or vice versa. Just because you didn't use drugs doesn't mean you can't minister to people who have. You can and you should, but it's interesting how that natural affinity draws people. Energy, people high energy like high energy. People who low energy like low energy. Giftedness, same kind of thing. People are drawn to giftedness and leadership ability. So, but the one I want you to remember is values. Values, very important. Okay. Number 10, the law of connection. let's say this would be doubly important to know for today. This definition is twice as important to know. Leaders touch a heart before they ask for a hand. Okay? Doubly important to know the law of connection. In other words, before you can lead people, you need to know them and you have to have a relationship with them. So it's the heart first, before they'll actually do stuff. So people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care, is the statement that Maxwell makes. So to connect with people, you have to value them, learn about them, and then adapt to who they are. So the law of connection means that we understand people's self-identity, meeting them where they are, and build connection with them first before we get them to follow us or buy into the vision we want them to go. So you have to make a connection people before you can expect them to follow you. Now, as a leader, the larger your organization gets, the less you're able to connect individually to people. So how do you do that? Because you have to recognize you can, as a leader, you can reach probably effectively maybe at the maximum about 100 people. Beyond that, that's your lid. There are some people who can go beyond that, but for most people, it's like 80 to 100 people is the most relationships you can maintain on a personal level. So how do you grow beyond that? What do you have to do? You have to have people around you that are also connecting to people who are connected to you. So as the larger your organization gets, you need to be building into leaders instead of just building into followers. So that's by connection. So if your leadership team, so in other words, when as a pastor, I recognized I can't reach all these people on a Sunday morning. I was having people come to church. I didn't know who they were week after week, and I'm not connected to them. But I had people on my team who were connected to them, and they were becoming their pastors more than I was. I was speaking on Sundays, but I wasn't their pastor. The person they connected with was their pastor. And I had to be okay with that. See, the problem is a lot of times we want to control that and say, no, I'm the pastor. I'm the guy. And it's like, no, you're not. They are. And that's okay because you limit the size of your organization when you make the demand that I'm the only one that can be connected to these people because you can't connect that far down. You're limited. So you just have to recognize that you have to empower people to connect to them so that by the relationship of the leader connected to you, that's going to sustain them in the organization. So, in order to grow, here's the reality you have to grow leaders in order to grow by connections. Because if you don't grow your leaders, a lot of times we say we can do this. One of the big traps for ministers is we think we can do enough to sustain ministry without building leaders. Like, I'll just do it all. And that's a trap. You can't do it all. You have to raise up leaders to do things with you and help you to sustain and cause the ministry to go forward. So building leaders is important. I think they say for every, what's it, one leader, you have three people in church. I think that's the statistic. So if you want to grow your church, you grow your leadership core. The more leaders and then leaders are also volunteers. The more people you have serving and leading in church, the larger your church will be. The less leaders you have, the smaller your church will be. So if you want to get a bigger youth group, bigger church, just get more people involved in serving and leading. And we always found that our biggest Sundays were our like programs that we did, like our Christmas program, Easter program. And you know why that was? Because we had more people doing things on Sunday morning than we usually do. And because of that, more people came to be a part of that Sunday morning because more people were involved. We always thought we're going to have everybody serving in front. No one's going to be in the audience because they're all up here. So what's going to happen out there? And I was always surprised. Look at all these people that are here. Where did all of them come from? They came to see the guys up front because they were serving and leading up front. So the more people you have involved leading, even as junior leaders or whatever, or just serving in different things, you'll have more people coming. So that's a big thing. So that's how you keep that connection going. Okay. Let's see here. Society 31. Before you move people to action, you must first move them with emotions. Okay. So before you can take an action, that's the heart. The idea that people aren't going to follow you until they know that you have their best interest at heart. So that's connecting. Again, it's not manipulation. It's being authentic with them. It's really caring for people. If you care for people, you want to take them in the right direction. But some people just want to take them in the right direction, whether they care for them or not. And that's really not what God's called us to do. God's called you to be a shepherd, not to be a butcher. A butcher takes takes sheep a certain direction with a certain purpose. It's not a good purpose. Well, not for the sheep anyway. It's tasty for everybody else, but it's not good for the sheep. God's called you to be a shepherd, which means shepherds actually care for the sheep. They love the sheep. It's not just enough that they're just there. So emotions are important. So 8 ways to connect with individuals. So the way you connect with people is you got to connect with yourself. In order to connect with people, if you don't know yourself, you can't connect with other people. If you don't know what you love and you value, it's really hard to connect with others. If you don't like yourself, you're not going to like other people. You got to get over that. The second one, communicate with oneness and sincerity. Again, being truthful with people is really important. If you're not truthful, if you're not sincere, people will catch that right away and not want to be a part of it. Um, know your audience. There are certain things you should know you can say, and some people, not that you have to watch your language, not you just have to watch what you say. Sometimes you have to be careful and considerate in the way you say things. Have you ever been in church service where someone said the wrong thing and they're not bad people, but they said something in an inarticulate way or a way that gets you go, ugh. Like I know that person and I know their intention was good, but the way it came out was not good. And that's not knowing your audience. So you have to know your audience a little bit when you communicate. There are certain things you could say to students that you can't say to adults. Sorry, excuse me. You can look at kids and say, well, that really sucks. And kids are like, yeah, it does. You say that to an adult with older people, and they're like, oh my goodness, scandal. You said the S word. That's really not the S word. You can scratch that if you want to. But you understand what I'm saying? It's a different audience. You have to know your audience. Number four, live your message. That's authenticity. You've got to be who you are. I mean, if you're preaching one thing on Sunday and you're living another way on Monday, that's not going to fly. I had a board member as a little kid growing up, and he was always at the altar and always wailing on Sunday morning. And then I saw him at work at John Deere the next day. Totally different guy. And I remember just looking at him going, whoa, he's not, he's not who I thought he was. And how do you think that affected my relationship and my respect for him on next Sunday? Because he wasn't who he said he was. So live your message. Go where they are. You should always go and be with people. Jesus was with people all the time. He went to the tax collectors and sinners. Matter of fact, people call Jesus a wine, the old King James, the wine bibber and the glutton, which means he looked like he was a drinker. It's a wine bibber and a glutton. Not that he did those things, but because he was with those people, that's what they assumed he did. And because he was with them. And I think it's good for us to be with people wherever they are, going to games with people who are sports parents with their kids, going to um, hanging out in the community events, doing those types of things. It's good. Focus on them and not yourself. This is very scriptural. Paul writes that how we ought to value others more than we ought to value ourselves. This is very much a Christ-centered message, is valuing people more than you value yourself. That's reflective of who Jesus was. Jesus came not to be served, but to serve and give his life as a ransom for many. Believe in them. Here's a big thing about connecting with individuals. Most people in life don't believe in them. If you do, you will win them over. If you actually invest trust and faith in people and say, I know you can, you know how many voices in your own life are positive? Just think about that. How many people actually encourage you? Most people are telling you everything you've done wrong. You know, you think even like you look at your family relationships. Most people don't have a positive family relationship. It's only a family relationship where it's like you messed up. You're a screw up. You're like this and that. It's like even the closest in those close relationships, people are most honest too. So maybe you did mess up once, but you can feel like you're like a screw up just because of one thing you did. But you can take that on as your identity. So if you believe in people and you encourage people, that is a huge gift. That is a voice very few people occupy in the lives of people that you serve, is an encouraging voice. If you're an encourager, that's transformational because nobody's doing that. They're only hearing negative things. I think you guys working with youth, there are very few people. They tell themselves, they don't need someone else to tell them how bad a thing is. They look at themselves in the mirror, they think they're bad. They look at their life and think it's bad. They have no friends. Social media, they're living life lower than everybody else. That's how they view themselves in a negative environment. And if you guys say, you guys are special, you're valuable, you know, Allie, if you say to those girls, you're beautiful, that's something they never hear. Their inner voices never tell them that. If you tell girls that, Justin can't do that. So, but you know what? If you do that, you guys have that voice and that authority to say things in the lives of people that they are desperate to hear. And if you can do that, that's huge. Um, and then that offer them direction and hope. Hope is the other thing that most people don't have in this life. They think it's just monotonous, but there is future. and there's hope, especially in the I think the Generation Z. They are really struggling with hope because they look at life and say, one of our girls that graduated probably a few years ago, she wrote on Facebook how I just don't see why, working 40 hours a week plus and doing all these things, I can't even get a house. I can't do this. I can't do this. And there's a hopelessness about the future that's just present in that generation because everything that they've been promised that if they work hard, they can do, they're not realizing that. And they're looking at going, there's just no hope. We have to be able to give them hope that there is hope for the future and that life isn't always going to be this way. So, but they give up before they get there. Law of the inner circle. So now we're halfway through and I have 40 minutes left. It's going to go fast from here. So what's the law of the inner circle? A leader's potential is determined by those closest to them. So who's in your inner circle? Who are the voices that you most identify with in your life? Sometimes they're friends, coworkers, sometimes they're leaders. But who's in your inner circle? Um, in high school, a guidance counselor once said, "You show me your friends, and I'll show you your future. Show me who you're hanging out with." Um, so you have to surround yourselves with people that you admire and respect. Don't allow your inner circle to be filled with people who are complacent and who maybe complain, who maybe think life's unfair. You don't need to be reinforced with the issues that are already easily accessible in your life. You need to have someone who's going to uplift you. So let me encourage you. Inner circle people oftentimes fall into your life. So your inner circle isn't somebody you choose. It's oftentimes people that are just there. Can I encourage you to look at who's in your inner circle and maybe encourage you to say, add some other voices into your inner circle rather than just who fell into it? Sometimes the people who fall into our inner circle aren't the best people to be in your inner circle because they're not affirming the things that God wants you to do. They're just, matter of fact, sometimes they're doing the opposite. I remember my cousin told me when I told her I was gonna, she goes, "What are you gonna do when you graduate high school?" And I said, "I'm gonna go to Bible college and study to be a pastor." And she looked at me. Now she went to the same church I did. We've known each other our whole lives. She looked at me and said, "Joel, why would you want to waste your life by doing that?" And I just looked at her like, I've never heard this before. Like, and I'm like, I'm not wasting my life. I'm being obedient to what the Lord has called me to do. And that's not a life that's wasted. But here I had a voice in my life that was challenging me, a voice close to me in my inner circle, challenging me about the choices that I had made about following the Lord. And it's and I just realized that okay, that's not a healthy inner circle voice to have because they're not affirming things that God's called me to do. So sometimes you just need to reevaluate who your inner circle is. Um, so as a leader, I would encourage you find someone who is a higher level leader than you and put them in your inner circle. Someone that you can look up to and say, someone you can ask questions of, someone that you can probe a little bit and say, "Hey, I have questions about this." Find someone who's up a little bit higher who can affirm who you are and put them in your inner circle. That will help you. That'll help you actually because you become like your inner circle. So when you put someone like that in your circle, it's actually going to help you become a higher level leader. So in this position, one of my great joys is I get to sit around the table with there's 66 superintendents in the Assemblies of God. So I'm one of 66. And I get to sit around these guys and talk to them. And I get to sit around the executive team in the Assemblies of God, which is the highest, the leaders of the AG. And I get to sit around and talk to these people and I get to hear them. And that's a huge benefit to me. I'm becoming a better leader, not because of who I am, but because of the people that I have in my inner circle. And you can too. So sometimes it's intentionally changing that. So I want to encourage you to do that. So all right, I gotta move on. Number 12 is the law of empowerment. What kind of leaders empower others? Secure leaders. So again, what kind of leaders empower others? Secure leaders. Leadership insecurity is a death knell. Like none of us as leaders, okay, I had a friend of mine who was from India. His name was Yesupadam, and he started old age homes, that's what he called senior homes in India. And orphanages. He started all these ministries, just phenomenal, phenomenal guy. And he said to me, he goes, I don't always know what I'm doing, but I never let people know that. I thought, that is because you look at him, you think he just makes all these great decisions and knows what he's always doing. And he goes, I don't always know what I'm doing, but I just don't tell people that. And I'm like, that is really cool. That to me, it helped me because I'm thinking, this guy always knows what to do. The reality is the best leaders in the world are still just making the best available choice, just like you are. So you don't have to look at people and go, oh man, I wish I could lead like them. Sometimes the best leaders in the world are just making the best choice, same thing you're doing, and they're okay. And if the leader, and if it fails, they just move on, and so can you. Don't let insecurity um, rule your leadership decisions. Insecure leaders never make decisions; they always weigh decisions. You can't afford to weigh decisions forever. You have to make decisions, and sometimes the decisions you make are good. Sometimes they are bad. But the reality is, we have to do that. So. And the other thing about insecure leaders is they're suspicious of people around them. They always think someone's going to take their position. And so then they don't empower people to do that. You can't empower someone if you think they're going to take you over. So you got to kind of hold that. But when you do that, you always keep the organization down. So, all right. So what are some barriers to empowerment? I like this first one, which is also underlined, by the way. Desire for job security is a barrier to empowerment. So in other words, I want to keep my position. So if I'm going to keep my position, I'm not going to empower anybody because if I empower somebody, they may take over. They might be better at it than I am. And God forbid that happens. So if I'm going to empower someone, I'm going to empower someone who's less apt than me. So that way I can keep my position and look good. And does that make if you empower bad people to do the job you're doing with you, does that make the organization look better? Or does it make it more look inept? It makes the organization look inept, okay? Resistance to change and lack of self-worth are also barriers to empowerment. Hey, we're back to Teddy Roosevelt again. I guess John Maxwell loves Teddy Roosevelt. He said, the best executive is the one who has sense enough to pick good men to do what he wants done and the self-restraint to keep from meddling with them while they do it. So as a leader, you need to empower people that are better than you to do jobs that you can or can't do. And that's okay. And because honestly, when you empower people to do things, you secure your leadership instead of you make your leadership open for, being removed or being replaced. When you're secure as a leader and you're empowering people, you become a better leader, and people respect you for that. If you think you're the best leader at everything, you're not. There will always be better people than you. And a lot of those better people in church are looking for opportunities to minister. And if you empower them, they will look better than you. And if you're okay with that, you'll look like a better leader. If you're not okay with it, then you'll look petty. You'll try to put them down. Say, oh, they're not that great. You don't have to do that. There's always somebody better than you. But I always think it's funny. People always look at you and say, wow, how'd you? I mean, you're a really good leader. I'm like, there's always been someone better than me. It's true. There's always someone better than me. It's not mad. That doesn't mean I'm putting myself down. It's a realization of the reality. There's always someone better, and that doesn't make you a bad leader. It just makes you willing to empower the best leaders, and that's what we need to do. Let's empower the best people instead of just empowering people that won't be a threat to us. So, all right. Maxwell says this. I think Maxwell says enlarging others makes you larger. Also, a buffet does. Sorry, enlarging others makes you larger, and that's what empowerment is. So if you're allowing more people to do things in ministry, and your ministry will never grow until you empower people. You have to choose to do that. You have to empower people to do ministry. Law of the picture. There's a pretty picture there. You can see that picture back there. The law of the picture. What does the law of the picture say? People do what they see. People do what they see. So what you model to others is what you're going to see people modeling as well. So it's that the little picture up there says monkey see, monkey do. The reality is what you show people how to live is the way they're going to live. You show people what you value, that's the way they're going to value. This is just the way it is. So If when leaders do the right thing, people do the right thing. You see this in the book of Judges, where when you had a judge that did the right thing, everybody did the right thing. Judge dies, guess what happens? Everybody does the wrong thing. Why? What was this? What was the static thing that kept people doing the right thing? It was the leader. And that's so true for us, where you don't have the scriptures, because the scripture wasn't really taught back in the book of Judges. It was the leader that set the course. And not saying we shouldn't teach scriptures, but I'm just telling you, people will follow a leader because they don't know the scriptures. They'll follow the leader first and do what you guys do because you're setting that example. So that's really what the law of the picture is. Okay. What four modeling insights should we remember? The most important is number four, which is the most valuable gift a leader can give is giving a good example. By being a good example, that's the best modeling you can do is by being a good example. The other ones is followers are watching what you do. That is so true. You notice that when you have kids, kids do they act like you, which you think would be a compliment, but sometimes you don't like the way you act. And so then it's not a compliment. You're like, oh, why are you doing like that? Why do you act like your mom that way instead of acting like me? They act like me instead. That's bad. Um, so just recognize that. Easier to teach what's right than to do what's right. That's really true. It's easy to tell people, do this, but then you don't do it. And that's inconsistent. And we should try to work on changing ourselves before trying to improve others. Doesn't that sound like Jesus said, deal with the beam in your own eye before you deal with the mote or the debris or fleck that's in somebody else's eye? And lastly, the most valuable gift you can give, good example. Modeling, be a good example. Just connect those two things. Number 14, the law of buy-in. What's the law of buy-in? They buy into the leader and then the vision. If people aren't bought into you as a leader, they will never buy into the vision that you have. So they have to buy into the leader and then the vision. So what happens when followers don't like the leader? They look for another one. That just happens. If they don't like the leader, in other words, if they're not bought into you, they'll look for someone else to take up that space. People follow worthy leaders to promote causes that they can believe in. So a lot of times we think cause, like if you give kids a cause, give people a cause, they'll follow that. But they won't follow cause unless they have a trustworthy leader leading the cause. So that's what they're looking for first. They're looking for the cause. The cause is good, that's great, but the cause itself is not enough. They need somebody leading that charge. And if they do that, they'll buy into that. Let's see here. So I like this. Maxwell said this. Sometimes saying no to a bad leader means saying no to a good opportunity. So if you say no to a bad leader, even though it's a good opportunity, that's the right thing to do. And sometimes saying no to a bad opportunity means saying no to a good leader. So a good leader can come with an opportunity and say, "Hey, this is what I want to do," and it's wrong. You say no to that. That's the right thing to do. And you can say a bad leader can have the right opportunity, but they're the bad leader for it. If it's a bad leader and the right opportunity, that's still a no because it's not going to go anywhere. It's the wrong leader. You have to have the right leader and the right opportunity for it to be successful. Sometimes we think we can make things work with people, and sometimes we just the easy thing and the right thing to do is to say no. That's a hard thing to do, by the way. It's a hard thing to do. So you cannot separate leaders from the causes that they promote. It cannot be done no matter how hard you try. It's either an either or proposition. The two never go together. So can't separate it. All right. Number 15, the law of victory. Leaders find a way for a team to win. I got my little picture of James T. Kirk up there. I don't know if you're a Star Trek fan or not. Not a Star Trek fan. I'm sorry. God will forgive you.
I think that's another thing that we're too old.
Oh yeah, Star Trek.
Very
So
young.
it's Star Trek. Yeah. Well, the movie's been remade, so they've redone these things. So Chris Pine did this. I should put Chris Pine up there. I should put Chris Pine up there. They had the Kobayashi Maru, which he had this test that was unbeatable test, and Kirk cheated. He changed the conditions of the test so that he could actually win the unwinnable scenario. And because of that, he got a commission or commendation. But the law of victory is that we try to find a way to win. By the way, winning doesn't have to be defined by the way we originally defined what our purpose was. Sometimes in a losing scenario, you can say we won because we learned this. This was the win. This is our takeaway. We actually learned that we can't do this, or we could do this, or we could do this better. So a win doesn't mean necessarily you always have to win. Sometimes winning is acknowledging what we learned and how we can grow from this situation, circumstance. People are always looking for you to win somehow. What's the value? Because people invested time, money, resources into this, and if we said, "Well, that was a big waste of time," it doesn't make it really excited to invest that time, money, resource in the next idea that you have. So you have to find a win. Um, so this is a Winston Churchill. Winston Churchill said when he was asked, "What is our aim?" He said, "Victory, victory at all cost, victory in spite of all terror, victory, however long and hard the road may be, for without victory, there is no survival." So just talking about how important it is for victory. Lou Holtz, who's the coach of Notre Dame football, he said you can't win without good athletes, but you can lose with them. This is where coaching makes the difference. I don't know if you've ever seen that. You can have the wrong coach with great athletes and they lose. And you're like, what's wrong? And a lot of times the coaches will say it's the team. They're not listening to me. They're not doing this or that. But sometimes it's the coaching staff. It's not the athletes. So sometimes you have to change coaches. So, all right. This is kind of an important one. So I'll spend a few minutes on this one. We're getting there. The law of the big mo, or momentum. Momentum is a leader's best friend. Momentum is the organization is moving in the right direction. And once it starts moving in the right direction, amazing things can happen. So here's the thing about momentum. When your organization has momentum, you can really feel like when things start going right and everything starts working, if you want to say everything's hitting on all cylinders, you start feeling like, hey, we're moving in this right direction. Momentum itself becomes empowering. Matter of fact, leaders look better. Leaders look better when there's momentum than they actually are. And things look better than they actually are when momentum's happening. This is kind of seven truths about momentum. It's the great exaggerator, easier to steer than start. The E is the one I want you to know. Momentum is the most powerful change agent. It really does. Once you get going, it's easy for people to change because they see the benefit of it right away, immediately. They say, I want to be a part of this because it's really working well. So I want to be a part of this thing. This is great. When your church has momentum, it just seems like new families are coming, different things are happening, everything is growing. It just doesn't seem like you can do anything wrong. It's not true, by the way. Momentum's not forever. Momentum's a season. And it's really not something you can start. It's something that you make. To me, you're making a lot of good choices along the way that facilitates this surge. And once that surge starts, it goes for a while and then it stops. There's no such thing as infinite momentum. It just goes and goes and goes. It really depends the way it starts. We start making the right decisions. We do honoring things. And as a result of that, momentum happens. So I like this. It says momentum is the leader's responsibility and it begins inside the leader. I think because the leader itself, when the leader's making the best choices and the right choices, that's where momentum starts, when we're doing the right thing. And it's just multiplies. It's like a snowball going down the hill. Starts small, but by the time it gets to the bottom of the hill, it's pretty big. Unless it's not sticky stone. Yeah, that's flat. And then it's over. Then it's done. The law of priorities. The law of priorities is that helps leaders understand that activity is not necessarily accomplishment. Okay, priorities. So here's priorities. Priorities are busyness. You can be busy and not be productive. So the idea of priority is saying, I want to do the right thing. I want to do the needful thing instead of doing what's the busy thing or the convenient thing. Always, as a leader, you need to always set your priorities. That's the law of priorities. I want to do that. Activity is not necessarily accomplishment. Just because I'm busy doesn't mean I'm doing anything. I got a great picture of a video of a guy. They're pushing this truck out of the mud. Okay, so there's these four guys pushing on the back of the truck to help push out of the mud. There's one guy standing in the truck bed, pushing on the cab of the truck. Now, the guy standing in the truck bed, pushing on the cab of the truck, is accomplishing absolutely nothing because he's in the truck. He's not pushing the truck forward at all because he's in the truck. But he looks very like he's really making a difference, but he's not accomplishing anything. We can do that in our organization. We can look busy, but not have any impact on what we're really trying to accomplish. So you have to get out of the truck and push on the bumper of the truck to get it out. Otherwise, you're not doing anything. In ministry, you will always be busy. There will always be the need of the moment that needs your attention. You can 80, there's an 8, Maxwell talks about this in the book. He talks about the 80-20 principle, which normally is like 80% of the things we do aren't really worth it, 20% are. We need to make, instead of doing the 20% of things that we should be doing, or that small percentage, we should do that 80% of the time and do the other stuff, which is trying to take all our attention, do that 20% of the time. If we're doing the things that are priority first, we will be more effective and productive than if we're doing all the other things that we have to do. In ministry, there are always things you have to do. People are always shocked at how much administrative work there is in ministry. They're like, I don't want to do this stuff. It's not important. It has to be done. It is important. But we also need to make sure we're staying on mission and doing the missional things that we have to do without saying, I don't have to do those other things. Because if you don't do those things long enough, you'll have other issues. Because they're all important, but you need to do the right things. So I think give 80% of your time to the top 20% of your people that are serving with you. If you can do that, if you can give your time to your team, that's the best investment that you can make. If you can develop your leaders in your teams, you'll find that is the best reward. If you look at what Jesus did, Jesus had thousands of people following him, and yet he focused on 12 people. He gave himself to those 12. So he had a lot of other people that he served. Matter of fact, I think the largest amount of people that served on an event for Jesus was 70 people. He sent out to 70, 2 by 2. That was the biggest event Jesus did, by the way. 70. That doesn't even you don't even get a newspaper article for 70 people. We do something, we had so many people come out. Oh, who cares? That was Jesus' biggest activity, right? But here's the thing, that's who Jesus focused on. And you look at the multiplication that happened afterwards because he invested himself in those people. If you invest in your teams, your small teams can have a larger effect long-term than you ever could. So that's legacy too. Okay. 3 R's of priorities. What's required? What gives you the greatest return and the greatest reward? So in other words, what are the things I need to do? That's what's required. What gives me the greatest return of my investment? That would be like investing in leaders is your greatest return, not investing in followers, which we're going to talk about here in a little bit as well. And then the greatest reward is that's a long term. Reward is always long term. It's not short term. Number 18, moving a little faster. Law of sacrifice. What does the law of sacrifice require? A leader must give up to go up. Here's one of the biggest misnomers about the higher level of leadership you serve, the more opportunities you have, the more perks you have. But the reality is, the higher level of leadership you have, the more responsibilities you have, the more limits you have. So you actually have more freedoms when you're leading less people than you do when you're leading more people. There's more required of you. Everybody looks at a high level leader and says, wow, I'd love to be them. But you don't see all the sacrifices that those people have to make to be in that position. You don't see all the travel that they have to do. You don't see all the communication, all the preparation, all the pressure. I remember as a young pastor, I was pastoring a church of about 30, 40 people working a full-time job and pastoring. And I sat in this guy's office who pastored a few hundred people. And I remember sitting there asking him, I said, hey, tell me, what's the difference between pastoring at your level and pastoring a small church like me? And he said, the answer is it's a 0. I'm like, there's no difference? He goes, no. He goes, your budget, you got to add a 0. The volunteers, you got to add a 0. Everything you do, you have to do at a higher level. And the larger you grow, you have to add another 0. So if God has you in a small context, he's teaching you how to develop a team And the next level is going to be adding a 0 to those concepts. Does that make sense? So it's not learning something new. It's multiplying what you already know. Because God teaches you things in the small context so that you'll understand how to grow them in a larger context. Because it's really doing the same thing, but it's doing it on a larger scale. So instead of you being the only one creating leaders, you're enlisting people who you can invest in to create leaders. So now instead of you doing it, you got 3 or 4 people doing it. And so your leadership level has gone from, it's added a 0. You got more people doing it. And that's really one of the secrets of sacrifice. You have a multiplication. It's just adding a 0. But the law of sacrifice is actually just saying, I have to surrender some of my freedoms for the sake of the organization, for what I'm doing. Like, for me personally, I'm more visible. So people are looking at me and I'm under more scrutiny than someone who's just a regular pastor of a church or serving as a certified pastor in some sort of position at a church. They look at me and they have a higher requirement than me. They see me going into a movie theater. They're like, well, what movie is that guy going to? You going to go see that new Avengers movie? Oh, because I used to love all those movies, but I don't love them anymore. You know what I mean? So it's like you look at those things and say, hey, there's a higher level of responsibility that I have. That in the higher level you get in your ministry, the more that you have people in your church that will say, well, you shouldn't be doing that because of the level of ministry that you have. That's just part of being a leader. And sometimes we balk at that a little bit and say, that's not right. I'm just a person like you. But the higher level you get, the more you have to sacrifice those freedoms for the sake of the gospel, which is really consistent, I think, with what the scripture has to say. So 4 things you should know about the law of sacrifice. The key is the last one. The higher level of leadership, the greater the sacrifice. You will have to sacrifice more the higher level that you're in. There's no success without sacrifice. Leaders are often asked to give up more than others. All true. And you must give up to stay up. So all those things are true. The higher level you serve, the more you have to surrender. The more you have to give up the freedoms, the abilities, your time. I mean, I was funny. I was prepping for surgery. I was sitting on the table prepping for surgery on Wednesday, and I got my phone out and I called someone and I said, hey, I got like 5 minutes before they take me in to have my surgery. I just wanted to share this with you. And they're like, why are you calling me? Why? You're going in for surgery like in 5 minutes. Why are you doing that? But to me, that's just my opportunity to serve someone. And I had a minute and I didn't care I was going for surgery. I wasn't on any drugs yet. So I think I gave them good advice. I don't know. Maybe not something. I don't know. But anyway, it's just kind of one of those things. As a leader, you're going to be asked to sacrifice things. Don't be angry about that. That's a part of the calling that God has established for you. You're going to have to make sacrifices. Leadership always requires that. It doesn't matter if you're leading in the world or you're leading in the church. Leadership always will require sacrifices. So I'd rather sacrifice for Jesus than for Steve Jobs. This is me. Law of timing. Law of timing is when to lead is as important as what to do and where to go. Timing is super important in ministry. You can have the right thing in your heart to do, and you do it at the wrong time, and it just blows up in your face. And you're like, why did that happen? I thought this is what God called me to do. It's a timing issue. It's not a calling issue. It's not a thing that God wants you to do that's wrong. It's just the timing is wrong. I love this. 4 outcomes. Now, I would say this is important to know all 4 of these. Okay. You look at the last part. Okay. So you have the wrong action at the wrong time leads to disaster. So disaster is wrong and wrong. Got it? That would be important to know. So the wrong action at the wrong time leads to disaster. If you do the wrong thing at the wrong time, that's doubly bad. That's why it's disaster, because it's the wrong decision. You did it at the wrong time. It implodes. It's like a nuclear bomb going off. Secondly, the right action at the wrong time brings resistance. If you think about it, I'm trying to do what's right, but you do it at the wrong time. People know that it's the wrong time, and they're going to fight you about it every step of the way. And that's why you get resistance, because they're feeling it's not the right time. Number 3, the wrong action at the right time is a mistake. So again, you had the right time, but you did the wrong thing. And that's why it's a mistake. You had the right timing down. You knew you needed to make a change, but you did the wrong thing. And that's why that was a mistake. And by the way, people will forgive you for mistakes. It takes a while to overcome it, but you can get forgiven for it. And lastly, the right action at the right time that's where you have success. So wrong, wrong, disaster, right, wrong, resistance, wrong, right, mistake, right, right, success. Just know all of those. Number 20, we only have 2 left. What's the law of explosive growth? To add growth, lead followers, to multiply, lead leaders. So explosive growth comes from developing leaders. What's required to maximize your leadership and help your organization reach its potential? You need to develop leaders. So all those things. So add growth, multiply, lead leaders. So what you need to do, both those things are important. What's required to maximize your leadership and help your organization reach its potential? You need to develop leaders. This is one of the key things of growth that you need to understand is, church growth isn't the be all end all, but didn't Jesus call us to make disciples? And when you create leaders, isn't that what you're doing? If I could take this out of a leadership concept and just put it into a discipleship concept, if that makes it more amenable for you to say, God's called us to create disciples. If we do that, we're doing exactly what he's called us to do. So when you think about mentoring people into becoming leaders, if you want to talk about discipling people, because really what you're doing, disciples create disciples. That's the whole Chi Alpha thing. Disciples create disciples. So what we're trying to do is help people to do that. So if you develop yourself, you can get success. If you develop a team, you can get growth. But if you develop leaders, that's where you get the explosive growth. So if I just work on me, which you should, you can get success. If you work on a team, you can grow. But if you develop leaders, the whole purpose of school of ministry is developing leaders. That's the whole purpose of this, is to invest in the leadership core of Southern Idaho. So we're doing this because we believe in the importance of you guys and what God's called you to do. And so if we invest in you, that's where the growth happens. It's not because of us, it's because of you. And that's what we're seeing. So I'm asking you to do the same thing. Look in your context. Who can I invest in? Who can we invest to raise up leaders to serve in our context? That's where explosive growth, not just growth, but explosive growth happens. And explosive growth it takes a while to get there. It takes a while to get to that level of where all of a sudden it just happens. But you're building toward it every time you disciple someone, every time you train someone, every time you help somebody to grow. So, um, a lot of times we try to work on people's weaknesses to help them get better. Sometimes we need to focus on their strengths that they have in their giftedness and release them in their giftedness. And when we release people in their giftedness, they can really go forward. So it's not that we can't work on people's weaknesses. Sorry, I said weaknesses, I meant strengths. You got to work on people's strengths and release them in their strengths. And that's where explosive growth happens. We oftentimes try to help people work through their weaknesses, which is good, but we also need to make sure we're helping people be released in their strengths, because people can operate in their strengths a lot easier and a lot more naturally than they can in their weaknesses. So it's just about looking to where people are at and helping them. This is let's see here. What's required to maximize your leadership and help your organization reach its potential? You need to develop leaders. 3 challenges of leading leaders. They're hard to find, they're hard to gather, and they're hard to keep. So here's the thing about leaders. They're hard to find, hard to gather, hard to keep. That's why God wants you to create them. Okay. If you're a lot of times people want to just find a leader to serve. That's so hard to do. It's really hard to do. Instead, God wants you to create them. He wants you to disciple them. That's where you get leaders. And then when you create a leader, they're always loyal to you. One of the things that I have found in church life is that people who are born in a church are more likely to stay in that church. So what I mean by that is people who come to Christ in your church are more likely to stay in that church than anybody else. And the reason is they imprint on the place where they were born. So if you remember your church that you grew up in, or the first church that you really connected with, I would gather this. I would just guess that that's probably a church where you came to Christ, was in that church, or that's the place where you really learned what it means to be a Christian. Something happened in that church that changed your life. And that's why that's your church. Like, that church has a unique place in your history, a unique place in your life. It's like no church that you ever remember. No church is ever like that church. And it's because you've imprinted on that church, because you were born there. Something happened that changed you. And here's what I'm telling you: when you lead people to Christ in that context, in your church body, they imprint on that church. You are creating that moment in their lives. They're going to be more loyal and find more meaningful relationship and discipling in that community than any other community they'll ever be a part of. There'll never be another place like that. And I'm always amazed, as people get older, they stop going to church because they miss that intimacy, that connection. But that connection, if you think about it, when a baby duck it comes out of its shell, when it sees the mother, it imprints on that mother. And that relationship is special and unique. But that relationship isn't meant to sustain that duckling forever. It's meant to help it get through its early life, to survive, so it can be a fruitful adult, right? It's not meant for it to stay that way forever. What happens is people think that's the relationship I want forever. And that's not what it's meant for. It's meant just to sustain you for now. So a lot of older people just end up leaving church, or a lot of people that today aren't going to church today are missing that connection. And it was never meant to last forever. But if you, in your context, can help people be born into that connection, I'm telling you, they're more loyal to you. They're more loyal to the church. They're more involved. They're more engaged than any other people you'll find, because they have that same feeling. This is mine. I belong here. So I just say that to encourage you. When you develop leaders, if you're seeing people born into the kingdom in your context, those are the best people to develop for leaders, because they'll be the ones that are the most excited to be a part of what you're doing. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Just a thought. Last one, law of legacy. Woohoo! We only have 12 minutes. I'll have you know, take my time. Here's the last 12 minutes. What's a leader's lasting value measured by? It's measured by succession. So you got to remember, John Maxwell wrote this book. This is pretty much the twilight of his ministry. And so he's viewing this from a different part where he wrote the rest of the book. Because he's viewing this as a guy who's stepping out of his role and into another role. So succession is, he's created an organization that is not just sustained by him, but it's sustained by others. Okay. Ultimately, when we only can minister for a season wherever you are. You're not there, not because even if you're there for life, eventually life doesn't happen anymore. I won't tell you why, but you only have a season, right? All of us have a season. And eventually, when you step out, what's going to happen to the organization? What's going to happen to the ministry after you're gone? If you've done everything right, you created a leadership team, they'll be able to sustain the vision of that church, even if you're not there anymore, which is what Pastor Andrew did. Pastor Andrew passed away just almost a year ago. And he created an organization where he stepped out because he stepped into eternity. And even in the midst of that, the organization has continued to function because he created, yes, very healthily, because he created an area of succession for that church. He created an opportunity for that church to survive because it wasn't just about him. And to use Pastor Andrew as an example, he was a force of nature as far as personality, but he created an environment where it wasn't about him. He valued the team, and he created that team which was able to sustain a movement beyond him. That's the value of succession. It really is. One of the things that he asks in the book is, he said, "What do you want people to say at your funeral? How do you want people to remember you by? What do you want people to say about you?" That's when you think about succession. It's not just about you. If it's just about you, you might have to refocus and make it more about the mission of what you're trying to do. Some of the greatest leaders are spawning organizations where the leaders are no longer recognized as the leaders, but because the organization mission has come to the forefront, not the leaders. So um, it's if you've got a great evangelistic organization, you won't know who maybe the founding leader is anymore, because it's not about the leader, it's about the mission that they established, that they felt God was calling us to do. So if you think about it, how you're going to be remembered. Are you going to be remembered for what you've done? Are you going to is there going to be a remembrance of the mission that you formulated and that you press forward on, that people are going to remember far beyond your existence? So this is what significance comes when they develop leaders to do great things with. Legacy comes when they put leaders in positions to do great things without them. So significance is a good thing, but legacy is even better. We want to be able to, for someone to step into the role after we're gone and do greater things. And that's a hard thing to do. So how is legacy created? Only when a person puts his organization into the position to do great things without him. So that's how legacy is created. You're basically giving the opportunity for someone else to step into an organization and do greater things when you're not there. Mm-hmm. So a couple things in conclusion, just to reaffirm. What does everything rise and fall on? It's leadership. I would say that's doubly important to know for the test. Maybe twice. You may have that same question. So what does everything rise and fall on? It's interesting that it is there twice, but it is there twice. It's on leadership. So it's not on money, for instance, it's on leadership. What do personal relationship, structure, vision, and leadership determine for an organization? Now, I want to spend a few minutes on this because these 5 things are really important to know. These 5 things. Important to know all 5 things. So personnel determines the potential. So you want to know, it talks about what's the determinant for the personnel determines the potential. The better people you have in the organization, the better the future opportunities are for that organization. So and it's true, like Manasseh, you a sales team, right? If you have 3 bad salesmen and 1 good one, the potential is not that great. You know what? The better the personnel you have. So as a leader, you have to look at putting the best people in positions of authority that you can. Number 2, relationships. Relationships determine morale. So in other words, if you have people who are good at relationships, that will make everybody feel better about the organization, about the ministry, because they're connecting with people. And if people are connected with, they're valued. So number 3, structure. Structure determines the size. You can have a structure that only can support so many people. Like we're only going to do this for, like if you have a room, for instance, if you have a room where you're doing ministry in, and you could have 30 people in that room, you might be able to put 50 people in that room for a day. But what's going to happen the next day? You're going to have 20 people not come back. And you're going to have 30 people in that room again. Why? Because the structure determines the size. There's nothing worse for a pastor than going all this, like on Easter Sunday, you do all this work to do the best you can to present the gospel to as many people as you can. We had an Easter egg hunt that we had 5,000 Easter eggs every Easter we put out. We had a pickup truck that went up and down our 11-acre lawn that we had. They were throwing the eggs out of bags. That's how they hid the Easter eggs. When you have 5,000 Easter eggs, nobody's hiding Easter eggs. You just are placing Easter eggs because they're everywhere. And by the way, if you don't think kids can clean their room, put all their stuff in Easter eggs. They will clean up every part of that room because they'll pick them all. So that's what I found out. It's amazing how kids can clean up 11 acres in 10 minutes of Easter eggs. Crazy how fast they can do that. We had all these things. We had Easter egg hunt for kids. We had prizes for kids. We did all these great things. And I remember the couple of the guys who were doing the parking lot came up to me after church and they said, Pastor, we watched people drive into the parking lot and there was no parking spaces and they drove out. That just puts a dagger in my heart and twisted a couple times because I felt like here we had this opportunity, we did everything we could, but our structure was such we couldn't facilitate a number of the people that we had coming to church. So structure determines size. Number 3, vision determines direction. Again, if you want to know where you're going, ask yourself, what's our vision? Where does God want us to go? If you can't articulate a vision, I want to challenge you to pray about it. Think about what God's already placed in your heart. So I really think visions, a lot of times it's already there. You just haven't articulated it yet. Think about, where does God want us to take this ministry? What does God want us to do? Who does God want us to reach? When does God want us to do this? How can we do this effectively? What aspect of ministry does He really want us to focus on? Think about vision, because vision determines the direction. Once you speak vision, people will know where you're going and they want to be a part of it. Number 5, sorry, leadership determines success. So the last thing is, you've got all these other things. So now you're leading that group. Now you're leading that ragtag fleet. That leadership's going to determine the success. So, okay. Vision, direction, leadership, success, structure, size, relationship, morale, personnel, potential. The 2 P's. Okay.
Cool.
Is that it? 12 o'clock. Do you guys have any questions? Anything?
What? Yeah.
I try to do it. And then if you guys, now everything I've gone over is on the test. If you want, we can go over the study guide if you'd like to after we're done. If you want to, or if you feel like you just want to take the test after lunch, we can do that too. It's whatever you want. Now, I will let you know, all of you know, that there's probably half true and false questions on this test. So if you are not a true and false person, I've given you all the information that will help you successfully navigate the true and false questions. But if you'd like to go over the one more time, we can do it one more time. And I'll just affirm those things to you again. So when we come back after lunch, I'll let you guys think about it. If you want to go over the study guide real quick, only the study guide questions that we covered today are covered in the test. So you've heard everything that's on the test already today. So you should be aware of that at least once. Okay? Anything else? All right. Well, we're going to say goodbye.